Call to order the City of Lincoln City Council meeting of February 24th, 2014. Roll call, please.
Dick Anderson.
Here.
Gordon Eggleton is excused. Gary Ellingson.
Here.
Chester Norikis.
Here.
Roger Sprague is excused. Henry Quant.
Here.
And Wes Ryan.
Here.
Thank you. Please stand for a Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for one nation, under God, with liberty and justice for all. Thank
you. First item is comments from citizens present. This is an opportunity for members of the audience to bring to the council's attention anything, not anything, quite frankly. If you do decide that you want your comments to be part of the public record, I would suggest you wait until the public hearing item later in the agenda is called. Otherwise, your comments won't be made of record. But if you wanted to speak now, that's fine. Comments are limited to 5 minutes per citizen, and the city recorder will use the light system. Speakers may not yield their times to others, and as a general rule, this is not a time for exchange of questions. At the conclusion of this agenda item, a counselor may discuss or raise questions regarding an item presented by a citizen. As you come to the podium, if you'd state your name, that would be great for the record. And we have Mr. Warner.
Mayor and Council, my name is Jerry Warner, 33 Lakewood, and I'm last council meeting I discussed the city's purchase of the village of the Cascade Head, and thus become the city getting involved in land development. I now know that many citizens in this city are strongly opposed to it, and especially using our tax money for infrastructure costs. The failure of this city on the a good example is failure of the city on the 51st Street property, which was purchased for $1.2 million and has been sitting there vacant for 11 years. And the failure of the city on the Lincoln Palisades property. It took the Economic Development Committee a long time to find a buyer for this property because it was just sitting there off of the tax rolls. For the purchase of Village of the Cascade, you spent all the money in the affordable housing budget, $565,000, all the open space fund money, $555,000, and the remainder of the $2.5 billion purchase and other closing costs came from the General Reserve Fund. If the city would have accepted the offer to sell the property, they would have had their money back, plus 50 acres of prime property on the subdivision free and clear. They would also have had part of the pumps costs paid for by the property owners rather than the citizens of this city are going to have to pay for. Anyway, also, the property would be back on the tax rolls. The assessed value of that property is $4.6 million, which puts a lot of money in the tax base. This would have provided the funds for the Nell Scott Strip utility relocation very easily. This is concerning the Nell Scott Strip project. This year's budget was $400,000 in the budget, but now the city is claiming it will cost $1.8 million, over 4 times greater. 90 of your 2013-14 budget. Contingency fund, there's $1,872,888 for sewer replacement, and it's in a reserve contingency fund. I understand that $1 million is going to be taken out of that contingency fund for sewer. This only leaves $400,000 unfunded, which could have been made up on a short-term loan until budget time, or it could be budgeted. It is my understanding that the city has already provided the sale for $4 million in bonds for utilities, which will be paid by us, the taxpayer. Doesn't this seem to be a little overkill to raise a balance of $400,000 for the Nilscott Strip project, which could have been paid for if the city hadn't spent the money on buying the village of the Cascade Head? If the bonds are for 10 years, you, all of us taxpayers, will get to pay $900,000 in interest alone. There is one more bit of good news for you, and I'll bet anyone in the city will hide. The city will hide another sewer and water rate increase in the budget, in addition to the 4% that was hidden in there last year. This means that right now, and since 2006, the city has increased the sewer and water rates by 45%. Here's one more thought. During the recession, Mr. Hocker hired 30 more employees, bringing up the total number of employees to 137 full-time equivalent, at the cost of $4,500,000 to the taxpayers. This will cost you, the taxpayers, over $50 million over the next 10 years for raises, health insurance, and retirement. Lincoln City has one employee, and hear this well. Lincoln City has one employee for every 59 citizens. The average of 7 coastal communities of similar size is 128, from Astoria to Coos Bay. So we have twice as many employees here. This is very concerning. We thought maybe that this city council would step up and do something about this after the last election, but it hasn't happened. Now we're dealing with some part-time people, and as far as I'm concerned, from the taxpayer's standpoint, they only have 3 options. One of them is ask for resignations, 2 is to vote people out by ballot, and 3rd is to recall the council. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Warner. It's fortunate it's election year.
That's right.
Mr. Hoover.
Mayor Anderson, members of the council, my name is Jim Hoover. I live at 3150 East Devils Lake Road. I'm a property owner in the city of Lincoln City. I also have businesses in the city of Lincoln City. Last week's VRD hearing that's being extended till tonight left me with more questions than answers. And while I understand that this period of time right now doesn't include them in the record, I believe it's important as city councilors and as the general public that we ask and get answers to some of these questions. First question, would we lose all the people who presently stay in VRDs if we limited or banned VRDs? And what would that do to the city parks budget, the city police budget, the city streets budget, and the city VCB budget, which are all dependent upon transient room tax that is generated by these VRDs? So once again, I've never heard the question asked, never heard the question answered. Would we lose all the people that presently stay in VRDs if we limited or eliminated VRDs? Question number 2. I've been asking the question at the last meeting, what's the problem with VRDs? And I had a number of people tell me that the committee, the Blue Ribbon Committee, obviously identified some problem. And I respect these people. I know they put a lot of time in, and my guess is they weren't able to identify a problem, because I've never seen a problem or a solution that included 95% of the problem. And this is what I'm referring to. It's not part of the record that I can find, but after asking people on the VRD committee, 95% of the existing VRDs were included in the commercial or the yes residential zone on the map. How can you have a solution to a problem that includes 95% of the problem? And I'm not saying that there's a problem. I'm just saying that it appears that the solution to this non-defined, so far, non-identified problem included 95% of the problem in the solution. Number 3, what did the city staff so dislike about the Blue Ribbon Committee's proposal that they spent staff time and attorney time to write 2 alternates to the proposal that the Blue Ribbon staff came up with. It's my understanding that this Blue Ribbon Committee spent over 1,000 hours. I know that the mayor was a participant, at least in those meetings, by attending. I haven't ever heard the city staff actually say what it was that they didn't like about this committee's solution to the problem that we still haven't yet identified that compelled them to come up with 2 other solutions. And to expand on that a little bit, I'm concerned for the public process. I believe that's an important part of everything that goes on. And if we say to people on committees, after you've put in 1,000 hours, after you've proposed a solution, we may take your solution and come up with other solutions without telling you why we don't like yours, and ask people, do you like ours better? Without identifying what the problem is with the VRD, how can we ask what solution is the best? Last week, while I was testifying and listening to the testimony of other people, the question was asked several times by the mayor, which proposal do you like best? So the question I would ask back is, what is the problem? Because if you can't identify for me what the problem is, it's very hard to answer your question, what solution do you like best, or what ordinance do you like best, because as yet I haven't heard anybody identify what the problem is. And I would propose that the same problem exists for you as the council, and I'd be very frustrated because you're being asked to look at 3 alternate proposals without being given the information by either city staff or the committee about what the problem is. Hence, how can you decide which one solves the problem best with the least economic impact, with the least loss of property rights, unless somebody specifically identifies what the problem is? Once the problem with the VRD is identified, if there is one, then there's a process that says, does the problem that's identified, once again, we haven't identified it yet, does it occur also in vacation homes that aren't VRDs? Does it occur in hotels or motels? Does it occur in apartment complex? Does it occur in single-family homes more? Because just because you've identified a problem doesn't mean that the problem happens more in a vacation rental than it happens in other types of residences in Lincoln City. Why didn't the committee write down the problem? Why hasn't city staff actually identified the problem? What I believe needs to happen in order for this to be a solution that's handled including the public is that the city council say to the Blue Ribbon Committee, we would like for you to meet one more time, and we would like for you to write down what the problem is so that we can then find a solution to the problem. That includes the citizens. It takes into respect the amount of time these people put into it, and then it allows the general public to actually make comment about the problem. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Hoover. Thank you, but this is a business meeting. Anybody else that didn't get a chance to sign up would like to make comments now? Hearing none, we'll then move on. Next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. The consent agenda, these items are considered routine and may be enacted in one motion without separate discussion. Any councilor may request that an item be removed for separate discussion and action. The consent agenda consists of, number 1, minutes of the meeting for January 27th, 2014. Number 2, minutes of meeting for February 10th, 2014. Number 3, Oregon Liquor Control Commission application for additional privileges, Ashley Inn and Suites. And number 4, appointment as City Manager Pro Tem. Anybody have any requests to remove for further discussion? Hearing none.
To approve the consent agenda?
We have a motion to approve the consent agenda. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
With a no, any objections? Hearing none. Thank you. Special order of business. There's a request for approval, the cooperative improvement agreement, City and Oregon Department of Transportation for relocation of underground utilities.
I presume you'd like me to speak to these. This is a tough one for us. This is an agreement that will pay an unknown amount for undergrounding a portion of our utilities in US 101 for the upcoming project. The ODOT estimate for this is $532,000. Our estimate is a little higher than that. We don't know what the contractor will bid on, what the low bidder will bid on these items. Whatever that is, that's what we're responsible for. We were able to negotiate some changes in the payment schedule, the timing of the payment. So instead of the entire $532 up front, we'd deposit $100,000, and then we'll make payments as called upon. That'll give us approximately 2 or 3 months to make those payments. The tough part is the unknown amount, and this is apparently non-negotiable with ODOT. Asked for a cap to be placed on it. We're unable to get a cap to be placed on it. Also asked that there be some remedy for an unbalanced bid or a front-loaded bid should that occur, and was told that that really can't happen. So we're kind of left with this one, and if we don't approve this agreement tonight, the project will be put on hold. I don't know what that means. It's scheduled to be bid by ODOT on the 27th of February, and we presumably would know what our obligation is within a day or two after that. So it's before council. I, with great hesitation, recommend that we approve this. I hate to see a project of this magnitude and this importance put on hold, and I don't know what that means or for how long it would be put on hold. And as to the amount, this is in addition to the contract that we awarded at the last meeting, again, for undergrounding utilities, the portion that we'll be doing, about $700,000. The budget for this, we went through this in some detail, both at the workshop and at the recent meeting. We budgeted an unknown number last year when we didn't have a design. Okay, we had no idea where the conflicts would be. We did have a pledge of ODOT that they would minimize those conflicts. We signed a memorandum of agreement with them, a memorandum of understanding with them, that they would endeavor to minimize the conflicts, and I guess this is their best effort to do so, or I'm hoping it's their best effort to do so. So it's before council.
Again, reminder of council that the ODOT project's roughly $19 million road project and scheduled to commence, well, we would be the first to go.
We'll be the first one. We've awarded our contract, and that'll begin, I believe the pre-construction conference on that is about 10 days away, and then they'll begin pretty quickly after that.
Questions from council?
Motion that we approve with ODOT a bullet.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Discussion. Any?
Yeah, I think the project's been going on for 10 years now.
Yeah, at least 10 years. We actually initiated the project because this section, this gap section, was I think about 12, 13 years ago, was identified as a regional problem, and it was causing us problems and traffic backups and affecting our visitor, our peak visitor load. It was backing up at that time, and so we did an initial design of a 3-lane section through there. I'm going to give you a real quick history of this. And had a preliminary approval from ODOT. I think that was about a $500,000 job. We didn't proceed with that project. ODOT stepped in and did a 3-lane design. It was done by URS, a consulting firm. And they spent, I believe, about $1 million, $1.2 million to URS to do a design. ODOT rejected the design and took the project in-house. They changed the funding source from what it was initially to a modernization project. That required initially required a 5-lane design, and they pledged that they would design a 5-lane section and acquire the right-of-way for it, but pledged that they would never build it, just the 3 lanes. So we protested that. That took a year or two, and then ultimately they redesigned and went to the present 3-lane section, which we are on board with. Long history. And, I should mention, because people are probably watching the houses being demolished, we did everything we could before those houses were built to have ODOT acquire that piece of right-of-way, and their regulations did not permit them to do so, as they didn't have an active project at that time. So we were forced to issue a building permit for those 2 houses, and they were built and never occupied.
We have a motion and a second. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah, we're in the discussion. I might point out that over that 10 to 13 years, that the project didn't get fully funded, the last $5 million, until just last year. Right. The last $5 million was allocated for the project. So it's been a long haul. Chester, go ahead.
Mr. Hawker, have we sent ODOT a signed confidentiality agreement?
It was not necessary. I was able to get their estimates, and you have them.
So we're feeling
that's the basis.
532,000 is fairly accurate?
No, I don't. I believe it's higher than that. I mean, that's their estimate. Our estimate by our consulting engineer was a lot more detailed and is a higher number. I would rather not disclose that in public because the bids are still out, and that would be inappropriate for me to do so. Council is aware of that higher number.
All right. Just Gary, question?
Yes, I hope people will realize how responsible we've tried to be throughout this entire process. I mean, this is years and years of going back and forth, and finally coming to a point where ODOT has been working with us, in my estimation, for the last 2.5 or 3 years. This part of the arrangement, if it were a perfect world for any of us, this is messy. People looking from the outside, not realizing how this works, would say to us, how could you be in the position that you're in right now? The simple fact of the matter is we were just made aware of this ourselves recently, and for all intents and purposes, that project is underway. I mean, they're putting a gas line in there right now as we speak. The houses have been taken down. I thought long and hard about this, and for me, what it came down to is this job ultimately important enough to us to have the safety of having a sidewalk and a pathway up through that area? And the answer that I gave to myself is yes, it is. It's also going to be wonderful to have there be a turn lane for traffic, ultimately, particularly traffic that goes into some of the existing businesses that are already in that area, instead of stopping where they presently do and having cars back up behind them, sometimes for long distances. In the busier months, when that happens, it starts a packing process that basically goes on for a long period of time after the cars turn. And so we can't do this by ourselves. ODOT is in charge of this, and we're going to have to do the best we can. The bids we got, I'm sorry to be taking as long as I am, but the bids we got for doing the first part of the work that we were responsible to do came in much lower than what we had hoped for. So there was a savings there. And that is not to say if the bids now come in higher, there's an excuse for that or some justification for that. I hope they don't. But we're not, right now, we're not buried in this. And that's why I seconded Wes's motion. I'd like very much to see this work be completed.
Mayor, I had one other comment. I don't want to be the apologist for ODOT, but we need to keep in mind that we are occupying their highway with our water and sewer lines. And under those guidelines, we have to move them when they have a project. That's how it works. That's their position, and I think it's a fair one. The other thing I want to point out is that they have been pretty generous in including some amenities in this project that we had to fight for, and the one that I think is maybe the most important besides the sidewalk is the signal at 32nd Street, which we've been crying for many, many years, and always been told, no, you can't have a signal there. Well, we're going to get a signal there one way or the other, and I think this project's going to do it. So they've been very cooperative in recent years. This is a tough one to swallow.
Would agree. Other discussion? Hearing none, then there's a motion with a second on the table. Roll call, please.
Norikis?
Yes.
Quant?
Yes.
Anderson?
Yes.
And Ryan? Ellingson?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Great. Thank you. City Manager report.
Very brief, Mayor. Our city recorder, Kathy Steer, would like us to nail down whether we're going to have a meeting on Memorial Day or not, and that's because we have to schedule hearings, et cetera. And the recommendation is that we just try to skip that meeting altogether and call a special if need be. That's Monday, the 26th of May. If that meets council's pleasure, we would simply cancel it. If pressing business came up, we would contact you about a special meeting.
Pleasure of the council.
I've got no problems canceling a meeting.
The 26th is actually the actual holiday?
Yes, it is.
Last Monday of the month. Okay. All right. That'd be fine.
Okay.
Consensus to cancel that meeting.
And the only other thing that I wanted to report on is that we discussed a couple of meetings ago changing our Channel 4 format drastically from one that has, most of the time, a bulletin board that's pretty dry to watch to meeting after meeting after meeting. Council meetings, perhaps 3 council meetings, interspaced with 3 planning commission meetings and a few other meetings. I've had only good comments on that proposal. I think when people surf by Channel 4, they would much rather stop and watch something happening rather than a bulletin board. And so as soon as we get a couple more meetings with a date and type of meeting trailer on the screen, that switch will be made over unless you wish to redirect me, in which case I'm happy to do that.
No, I too heard positive motions from the citizens to change that.
Probably take another couple weeks. We need about 3 meetings with the dates on them before we'll switch over.
Okay. Is that consensus with the council?
Yep.
Sounds good.
Thank you, Mayor. That's all I had.
Mr. Apicella, did you have anything that you wanted to? Okay. And next order of business, we have public hearings, and we have a public hearing. We're reconvening the public hearing to receive public comments on proposed litigation legislative amendments regarding vacation rental dwellings, planning file ZOA 2013-05, and alternatives Alt 1, Alt 2. This public hearing opened on February 10th, 2014, and continued to this date. And there's been additional testimony provided to the public record, and all sorts of good stuff that Kathy has. What we'll end up doing is, I had kept the list of people who had signed up last meeting that we'll call first and go through that, and then I've got other people that signed up. As a reminder, we have 3 minutes to testify, and if you testified before, you don't testify again, because that's already part of the public record. And let's see, I did have some questions regarding potential conflicts of interest on the council, and I wonder if, councilors, if you...
Yes, Mayor, I've got a brief statement I would like to make.
Okay.
I would like to disclose that I am employed by Chinook Winds Casino Resort. I understand that some may believe that legislative proposals before the council could harm or could benefit my employer. Under Oregon law, a potential conflict of interest is one that could occur. After disclosure, I may participate and vote. Mayor?
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I also have a statement. I would like to disclose that I'm employed by Ocean Terrace Condominiums. I understand that some may believe that the legislative proposals before the council could harm or could benefit my employer. Under Oregon law, potential conflict of interest is one that could occur. After disclosure, I may participate and vote.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I would like to disclose that I am a member of a partnership that owns the Sandcastle Beachfront Motel in the Nell Scott area of Lincoln City. And I understand that some may believe that legislation proposals before this council could harm or benefit me. Under Oregon law, a potential conflict of interest is one that could occur. After disclosure, I may participate and vote. I would also like to state, Mr. Mayor, and I haven't checked this out with our attorney, but when this process first started, number one, I don't think any one of us three intentionally left this out at the beginning of this process. It was called to my attention. I was up near the Rhodes End area close to this weekend, and the person that brought it up to me, I apologize to. And if it's necessary for me to do that to any of you, I will do so. We're just wanting to err on the side of caution here and mention this. And if anybody has a problem, I'll speak for myself with me being on this legislative board that is hearing this matter. There won't be any hard feelings for me. You can go ahead and bring it up. You'd actually be doing me a favor if you
All right.
Had me not be here for this part of it.
Okay.
Thank you.
I just want to point out that I believe that this is actually a class exemption, which is not required to be announced at the meeting, but only the commission can declare class exemptions, and we don't have an advisory opinion from them saying it's a class exemption. So, in an abundance of caution, that's why I'm having you do this.
Great. Thank you. All right. Well, let's go then, starting off with the folks who signed up last meeting and didn't get a chance to testify. Diana Dunlop.
My name is Diana Dunlap, and I live at 1118 Northeast Aldertree Lane here in Lincoln City, and I've been a full-time resident since 1988. I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak. I've attended the planning commissions and spoke there as well. And I paid very close attention to the last meeting, and one of the things that I took away from it was that you were asking for direction, not just opinion. So I wanted to state I guess, my wish, which is that at this point, I agree with Mr. Hoover, there doesn't appear to be a problem that's identified. With Rich Townsend saying that there's been one permit taken away in 14 years, just statistically, that says there's no problem. So with that, my wish is that nothing is done, that you take a look at this and say, we've looked at it, we've examined it every possible way, we've gotten input from everybody, but there clearly just isn't a problem. So that's, I guess, my input there. But part of the reason I've come up to that is I think the answer in the consensus group of saying there's yes and no areas obviously pose some type of a problem because there was an alternative 1 and 2 given. Some of the problems with 1 and 2 is apparently a Measure 49 issue, so we need to give some nights in the no zone. The problem with some nights in any zone, if that's the issue, is 30 poorly managed nights is awful. I mean, it's awful no matter if you're next to a permanent resident or someone just poorly using their beach home. But if you give me 30 nights, I will rent every Saturday night. And that ruins potentially someone living next door, if I'm a bad manager or property owner, 30 weekends a year. So it's not as a great a fix as it maybe sounds, other than maybe on a legal standpoint. So there's that. I wanted to address, too, that VRDs, I don't believe, show in any way a commercial use. I actually own a hotel here in town. I know what commercial lodging is. My beach house is not that. There's no employees there. There's no money exchanged. I see no difference between my parents who own the beach house with me, cooking dinner, playing board games, whatever, watching TV, than me renting it to a family that does the exact same thing. Those are residential uses, not commercial. I have a full staff at my hotel. I have on-site. None of that occurs at my beach house. Also, I feel that I've owned my house since 1995, and I hear people say the changes in the neighborhood. First, I believe the use is residential. I don't believe there is a change. With that, they say they didn't know what they were getting into. I would think if you're moving to a tourist community like ours, if that was a concern, you should check into it, because vacations happen when you live in this kind of community. Seems obvious, but maybe not to everybody. And also, and this comes just from, I guess, a management standpoint, and I see it two sides of this. On a vacation rental, quite honestly, the renters have no property rights and no rights. If you call me up and say there's somebody bad in my vacation home, I go over, I go, you've got 10 minutes, pack your stuff, and you're not getting your money back. If I have a bad monthly tenant, it could take me months to get them out. It's a long process. It's a legal process. And they have a ton of rights. And in my particular house is quite large. We've done it for 19 years with no problems. I see homes similar to this in Corvallis. My daughter's a college student. They rent to 5 or 6 single people, which brings about 20 other single people to use that house. It's a monthly rental. As an owner, I couldn't do anything, and I would do that to maximize the amount of rent I could get. So just, I guess I want to say it's all about being a good neighbor. And I've had the unfortunate experience to be next to a bad owner that I could do nothing about, and it was a bad enough owner that the city got involved as far as their upkeep of their property. So I don't think this is something that's related to VRDs. You're either a good neighbor or you're not, and we have proper rules that could be enforced to take care of that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sally Earls? Sally Earls? How about Stu Earls? How about Shirley Myers? How about Carolyn? I assume you want to wait until last. Are you? Come on up. So I'm assuming you're going to go for more minutes here.
We might need a couple more.
So are we going for the 15-minute shot? So you've got 5.
I don't think we're going to need
We're not
15
gonna need
minutes,
15
Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
We've gotten a pretty tight presentation put together, and so when I called you the other day to ask about that, I simply wanted to know if we had some flexibility, and if anything, maybe 2 or 3 minutes over. So,
Okay.
all right.
Thank you.
Now, by the way, I did register this evening to speak. I did not register last week, so this is why I'm coming along as a friend.
Gotcha.
All right.
Forget your name.
What's that?
Don't forget to say your name.
John Skipper, 1733 Northwest 34th Street, here in Lincoln City. Did you introduce yourself already?
Oh, Carolyn Plummer. My company is Pacific Retreats Vacation Home Rentals, 3126 Northeast Highway 101, Lincoln City.
We're speaking as members of the vacation rental consensus group that did quite a bit of work on this project going back a couple of years ago, and we have asked several other members of the VRD consensus group to attend this meeting this evening, as many of them as could attend. So if they could hold up their hands for a sort of a head count at this point, I would appreciate it. And to begin with, Carolyn has a presentation that she would like to make, and then I'll add some comments later.
Thank you. Well, here we are again to discuss vacation or short-term rentals. By definition, they are properties that are rented less than 30 days at a time. 2 years ago, this council embarked on a process to find a solution to the city's vacation rental debate. $50,000 was budgeted for the services of a conflict resolution expert, with an extra $20,000 budgeted for legal expenses if needed. Law professor Richard Burke was selected, and he and his team led the process. And those of us on the resulting consensus committee spent hundreds of person hours, in an effort to reach consensus. And I think we succeeded. No one is 100% happy, but that's okay because with a few exceptions, committee members were willing to compromise. Now it's ironic that several of us on the committee now find ourselves defending the results to the very city that came up with the idea. City staff seems determined to offer up complicated alternatives and add unnecessary regulations. Those of you familiar with the consensus report will know that several main themes were clear. Any new vacation rules should be simple. They should be fair. They should provide stability and predictability. They should recognize the huge contribution that VRDs make to the local economy. They should do no harm. They should be practical. There should be no tolerance of illegal VRDs. VRDs should not be singled out for unfair treatment with regard to parking and landscaping. And owners and managers should continue to work together toward preventing noise or other violations, with the violators themselves being fined or cited if violations occurred. There should be areas where VRDs are not only tolerated but welcomed by establishing yes and no zones. And existing VRDs in no zones should be allowed until a change of ownership occurs, with them eventually being eliminated in no zones. Now, to add to the confusion, the Planning Commission's recommendation of allowing 30 nights of rental for new VRDs in no zones makes no sense whatsoever to me. That would be like allowing people to smoke just one cigarette in a no-smoking area. In a no zone, no new VRDs should be allowed, period. The boundaries may need to be tweaked to accommodate those few properties that should logically be included in yes zones, such as Rich Briggs's home at the edge of Olivia Beach and the gentleman whose home is up on Southwest Dune near 14th. If you look at the yes-no proposed maps, you'll see why those properties should be in yes zones. And if you haven't heard from those two gentlemen, I hope you will before this process is over. In yes zones, on the other hand, the right to rent should be easily transferable in the event of a sale or other change of ownership. The current system places an undue burden on owners and managers, puts renters in jeopardy of having their plans canceled, and puts the city at risk of a huge black eye through forced reservation cancellations. The yes-no concept should either be adopted as outlined in the consensus report or rejected altogether. I am here this evening to urge you to follow the recommendations of the consensus report. According to Professor Burke's report, quote, VRDs were viewed positively by the vast majority of people who testified, unquote. I don't know what else would give you a clearer view of what your constituents want. From the young mother working hard to support her children by cleaning houses, to the local merchants and tradespeople who depend on vacation rentals for their livelihood, the citizens of Lincoln City are weary. They are ready for a solution. You will never have this opportunity again. If good people volunteer their time and effort for the benefit of their community and the results are rejected, you can bet that they'll never participate again. I ask that you direct city staff to find a way to make this work. There have been concerns expressed that the yes-no concept would place the city in legal jeopardy and vulnerable to Measure 49 claims. With all due respect to the city attorney and staff, why not take some of that $20,000 budgeted for legal fees and engage an expert land use attorney to find a way? In the spirit of helpfulness, a few consensus group members, including John and myself, have drafted an ordinance that we all feel reflects the consensus report's recommendations. It is simple, easy to read, it is fair, and it is what the citizens of Lincoln City want. Thank you. And you have copies of those, I trust. We delivered them before. Thank you.
Did all the council members get a copy of those comments?
We did.
Yeah, good. Thank you. As Carolyn was just saying, this draft ordinance that we prepared and has been presented to council does include all the recommendations from the consensus report. We meticulously checked off each and every recommendation, and it is in all those recommendations are included in that draft ordinance. This deals with the primary problems with VRDs, as we have discussed endlessly, including in many, many testimonies and discussions in the consensus group meetings. The primary three problems, as we all know, are parking, and we do have a double standard for parking in VRDs versus parking in the rest of legal parking spaces in the rest of Lincoln City, in that VRD parking must be on the site of the VRD residents. Noise, late parties, and disturbances in quiet neighborhoods where VRDs are frequently located. And Lincoln City has had a noise ordinance for these many years, and that's a matter of enforcement. And that's, I think, the long and the short of that one. So we don't need new VRD noise ordinances. We already have that. Trash, that's a common problem with homes other than VRDs in Lincoln City, and where it is common anyway, but it's not exclusive to VRDs, is what I want to say. So those are all enforcement issues and should be handled as such by the appropriate city agencies. The draft needs some tweaking, of course, but it should solve all the problems with good enforcement. On the other hand, Alt 1 and Alt 2 and some of the other ordinance drafts that we have seen come up after this consensus group report was presented, they do present some exposure, I think, for Measure 49 claims, and that, I think, is not exclusive to this approach with the consensus group recommendations. In addition, we have had several people testifying in the last meeting of council that we've heard nothing about any economic impact study of making some of these proposed changes, and I think that is incumbent on the city to do that. That happens at the state level. It happens at the national level. When legislation is proposed, economic impact studies are generally done and presented along with those proposed law changes. When you think about it, VRDs have really not caused all that many problems. As Diane Dunlap just said a few minutes ago, we've had one revocation in Lincoln City in the past 14 years. And as we learned in the testimony that we got from city records in the consensus group meetings, very few percentage-wise complaints have been recorded and responded to versus all the many, many nights of occupation that VRDs have experienced in this town. So that is the essential things that I wanted to mention to you, and thank you for your attention. If there are any questions, we can try to respond.
Actually, just a thank you and for the audience for coordinating. This what has happened here is John and Carolyn called ahead of time, even though it's part of the process, to get extra time. And what they're doing is representing the consensus group, or at least 5.
The majority, anyway.
At least 5 from the consensus group, times 3 minutes. I told them I'd give them 15 minutes, and that's what they've done. So we don't have to listen to the same thing being repeated. So thank you very much for both of you and for coordinating this.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
May I ask a question? I followed basically everything you were saying, except for the part about hiring a land use attorney. How does that fit into?
Well, if the claim is that a yes-no zone will open the city up to Measure 49 claims, it just stands to reason, and many of us believe that there has to be a way out there, and if you engage the services of someone, and I'm not depreciating the city attorney's skills, that's not my purpose, but you can't be an expert at everything, and so I know there are attorneys that are strictly land use experts, and I think it would be money well spent if this is what the people want. If the yes-no zone should not just be, the idea shouldn't be eliminated altogether. If it's going to be pursued, then you have to find a way to do it to minimize the expense and the risk to the city.
Thank you.
Does that answer your question?
To try to mitigate the liability.
Right.
Would be.
If you need heart surgery, you go to a cardiologist. You go to an expert, and you go to someone who does nothing but heart surgeries.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
Ellen Rebo?
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Eileen Rebo, and I'm here to say that I'm against the proposed laws that will inhibit vacation home rentals here in Lincoln City. These laws would prove to be a huge economic disaster for Lincoln City and Lincoln County as a whole. I have been a resident here for 12 years. I am a homeowner who has paid my Lincoln County property taxes all these years. I have also been an employee of Oregon Beach Vacations for the past 8 years. My daughters both graduated high school here in Lincoln City, and I'm invested in this community. If my long-term employment was threatened by restrictions on vacation home rentals, I would become unable to pay my Lincoln County property taxes, probably have to relocate and seek work elsewhere. Like myself, many of the homeowners of vacation dwellings would suffer the same fate and would start to pull out of their investments here in Lincoln City. Many would be forced to sell their homes because, let's face it, the only jobs that chiefly exist here in Lincoln City are related to tourism and often seasonal. I personally am a college graduate, but here in Lincoln City's economy, I'm lucky to be a housekeeper cleaning vacation homes. I believe it would be difficult or impossible for VDR homeowners to afford these higher-priced homes without the ability to supplement their income with revenues from their vacation rentals. The reality is that they are bringing revenue into Lincoln City from jobs that they have in higher economic earning cities, where they work. We need them here, and they need the supplemental income from vacation rentals. They pay large amounts in property tax, Lincoln City permit fees, and they upgrade the property values by improving their homes. Bottom line, if this new proposal gets passed, many homeowners will pull out of investments here, and property values will decrease. Also, potential new home buyers will not be interested because they too will not be able to get that supplemental income from vacation rentals. Lincoln City will lose out on all permit fees. This includes the many permits that local carpenters, roofers, plumbers, etc. pull when doing upgrades and maintenance on these homes. And the proposal would threaten Lincoln County's property tax base. One of the saddest outcomes of these proposed changes would be the effect on all local businesses. Much buying local would become a thing of the past. Vacation home rentals attract a unique group of visitors to the coast, often longer stays than hotels, 1 week or more, family groups, business retreats, and even visitors from other countries who want an intimate place to vacation together, not in separate rooms like hotels. Well, bottom line is the restaurants, the shops, every business that exists here across the board will suffer. Employees like me will suffer. People that rent homes to employees like me won't be able to collect rent. It's just across the board. And the only other thing I'd like to just say is that my daughter worked at the Culinary Center for many years, and the Lincoln City is continually, the radio, the casino, it's always events trying to bring in visitors. And that's the sole goal here for the Visitor Center. And I just feel that not allowing the vacation homes to have the freedom that they need, there wouldn't be places for the visitors to stay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Dennis Reagan, Vicki Reagan. How about Carol Rush?
Takes me a while sometimes.
That's all right.
I'm Carol Rush. I live at 1835 Northwest 32nd Street. I am a retired teacher and have lived here for more than 25 years. I also was a member of the Consensus Committee. I kind of like that blue ribbon title better. That sounds pretty good. I'm here tonight because I want a pony, just a little pony. Maybe a few chickens. I'm having trouble making my tax payments, and I figure I can offer pony rides and maybe sell some eggs and supplement my income. And you all know that's just as ridiculous as I'll get out. I think I might sue the city if you don't let me have this pony and the chickens. But, the thing is, bought my house in an R1 area, and I bought it realizing that I'm not going to have a pony, and I'm not going to have a few chickens in that area. there are a number of things that I can do in my R1 area. I can live in my house full-time, and I've done that, like I said, for more than 25 years. I can use it as a vacation home if I decide I don't want to live here. I can rent it out full-time, and I did that for a few months and didn't like it, so I came back. The thing is, with a responsible management company, those last two are not a problem. If you've got a problem with your full-time or part-time rental, they can deal with it for you. So I think the claims of, I'm going to sue the city if you don't let me rent out my home as a VRD, are not valid claims. There are things you can do with it. You're not being deprived of it if you can't have a VRD. And for the record, I favor Mr. Apicello's alternates 1 and 2. It's not restricting what areas you can rent your house as a VRD in, and it is limiting those so that they're not businesses. Many speakers have come before you last week and tonight saying, what's the problem? I don't see any problems with VRDs. Well, I think one of the things that they've said is if we can't rent out our house as a VRD, there's going to be lots of vacant houses. There already are lots of vacant houses because there are houses for sale and there are houses that are used for vacation homes. That's just the nature of the beast. So what's the problem? Well, I thought about things that I personally knew about. My friend's son was treated to a naked man using the hot tub out on the deck outside his window. Kind of a problem. The house across the street, there was a person trying to get in the bathroom window. It was vacant, so maybe he could explore what was in there. There was a person crouched out in front of my house, looking in the window of an occupied home. And there was a person on my deck at night who ran into the chimes. The ones that you might have heard a little more about, the group of cleaners and spouses working together to steal valuable items like flat screens from VRDs, the man who shot Officer Dodd was staying in a VRD, and the man who brought 2 boys to a VRD to party, and they killed him in that VRD. So there are some problems. I just thought I would try to answer those questions that were brought up at other meetings. And that's all I've got for you, and I promise I won't get a pony.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Doug Strickland. No Doug. How about Albert Saul? Okay. How about Diana Hinton?
It's cooler up here.
No.
Good evening, Mayor and Councilman. My name is Deanna Hinton. I'm a full-time resident in Rhodes End, and I'm testifying on behalf of Rhodes End Improvement Association in my role as president. REIA is the recognized neighborhood association for Rhodes End, and I'm assuming you'll give me a few more minutes.
Go ahead.
Thank you. We urge you to support the work of the consensus group, which has been a really good public process. The 3 associated ordinances should get your vote, along with amendments for Rhodes End, which I will cover later in my testimony. I have a written copy for you as well. In October of last year, REIA created a VRD committee of 17 active participants, many of whom served on the consensus group. 10 are representatives of VRD management companies, 2 are VRD owners, and 5 are residents, of which 3 are board members of REIA. In addition, we have the assistance of the city's planning department. Our focus, of course, has been on Rhodes End specifically, but with open minds, we've learned a lot from the overall experience of those who participated in the consensus group and from the planning department's insight and knowledge about zoning and regulation of VRDs. we're kind of new to this. I would like to take a moment to commend the VRD committee for its work and Rhodes End to this point. They've been wonderful. The committee has created best management practices for VRDs in Rhodes End. This effort took thoughtful discussion with some compromise, a job well done. We first wanted to know how many VRDs are located in Rhodes End and where they were. After compiling a list, the planning director provided a working map. We placed dots on the map so we would have a visual of the VRD locations. We have 169 known VRDs, or about 25% of all the houses in Rhodes End. We also have a listing of the rental properties and who is managing them, so we know who to call if there is a problem. This is one of the goals of the committee. Although the REIA VRD committee participated in assembling the list of VRDs, the manager contacts, and developed the best management practices, the following comments are from REIA and do not, I repeat, do not represent the views of the VRD committee. REIA cannot answer the question of whether we should be a yes or a no area or something in between. We are asking the city to work with us to conduct a public process to gather input from Rhodes End property owners for this issue alone and not to open up the zoning at this time. In doing some research along the coast within easy driving distance from the main population center, we found that other locations use formulas that allow licensing of VRDs in their area. The numbers of VRDs on average are lower than what we have in Rhodes End. For example, the rest of Lincoln City is about 8 to 10%, and according to Rich Birch's report for the consensus group, Manzanita has 17.5%, Cannon Beach has 92 VRDs total, Seaside has 20% in each 100-foot area, and none are allowed in the R1 zoning. And Newport allows rentals up to 10 times a year for each VRD. I've attached Rich Birch's comparison table to my written testimony, which I'll give to Kathy. Although each community counts them differently, it seems that by comparison, Rhodes End has a large number. As you know, Rhodes End is an all-residential neighborhood and not a mixed use or not a commercial district. Our research also found a newspaper article from August 16, 2011. This article was co-written by reporters of 5 coastal newspapers. At the end of the article is the following VRD density listing, which I've also included in my written testimony. Cannon Beach, 1 in 7, Rockaway, 1 in 10, Seaside, 1 in 14, Lincoln City, 1 in 17, Depot Bay, 1 in 19, Garibaldi, 1 in 58. Using this methodology, Rhodes End would be about 1 in 4. The settlement agreement between Lincoln City and Rhodes End water and sewer districts received much input from REIA. As you know, it grandfathered in the existing VRDs, but it doesn't state whether there can or should be others added. We're at 25% of the approximately 725 houses now. We believe that this should be given strong consideration. Perhaps there is a middle ground between the idea of a no zone and a yes zone in Rhodes End without affecting our zoning. In addition to supporting this package of ordinances, the consensus package, we have the following specific recommendations for Rhodes End. Number 1, honor the spirit of the settlement agreement and conduct a public process to gather input from the Rhodes End neighborhood as to what they want in their neighborhood, in our neighborhood, regarding VRD regulations and licensing without opening up the zoning hold of 5 years from November 26, 2013, when the settlement agreement was signed by you. You were the last signature, Mayor Anderson. Number 2, support the 16-person limitation on occupancy of VRDs in residential zones as suggested by the Planning Commission. Number 3, do not remove the parking requirements. Parking is one of the big ongoing issues in Rhodes End, as troublesome as noise. Providing dedicated parking spots for cars associated with VRDs is an appropriate regulation and goes far to handle the issues that would be created by removing the parking requirements. And finally, number 4, health and safety codes should be to current codes for all VRDs for the protection of the renters and the owners, understanding that appropriate time should be given to the owners to meet those. And thank you for the opportunity to provide our testimony.
Great, thank you. You'll provide Kathy with a copy, will you? Thank you very much. Don Williams.
Evening, Don Williams. Here's my thoughts and ideas, as requested. A consensus group was formed to find a solution to a problem that didn't exist. The group spent months of their own time coming up with a solution to a problem that doesn't exist. Their solution proved that a problem didn't exist. The solution caused another problem, a possible flood of lawsuits. So amendments were proposed to find a solution to the solution of the problem that doesn't exist. And now I and others have had to spend yet another evening here to try and protect ourselves and our city's economy from a solution to a problem that doesn't exist. My solutions are simple. I speak for no one but myself. Thank the consensus group for their time and effort. New friendships and understandings were forged within it. Except that because the group didn't have the benefit of legal counsel, they couldn't have foreseen that their solution to the non-existent problem couldn't be enacted as they desired. Therefore, the entire yes-no overlay structure can't remain. Reject all subsequent amendments. Remove 2 words from the city code, those being ancillary use. Enforce existing rules and regulations that have proven very successful. And at a separate time, visit the ideas that were put forth for safety regulations with input from actual stakeholders so City Council can move forward in an educated fashion. That's all I have for that. I want to touch on something that's been said just recently about poor behavior in homes. I've been a landlord for 30 years. I've had prostitutes. I've had shootings. I've been personally attacked by people in my own home who are staying with me. Stupid people do stupid things, no matter where they are. And to single out a hotel because something happened like a standoff, or a VRD because someone decided to go naked hot tubbing, or because someone did something very stupid in my home, is ridiculous and should have no bearing on this discussion. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Edward, please. It's a business meeting. It's open to the public, but the participation is when you come up here, not in the stands. So that's the last time. Thank you. Edward Clements.
Edward Clements. I'm speaking on my own behalf as a property owner and on behalf of Mike Devlin, who has a home here, lives in Portland, could not be here tonight. His father-in-law is in ICU recovering from open heart surgery. So he sent a letter, asked me to communicate on his behalf. So if I could have a little extended time, I probably only need about 2 minutes.
Actually, what you could do is give his letter to the clerk.
Okay.
And that'll become part of the public record.
That'd be fine. Thank you. Mr. Mayor and councilors, thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. I want to start off by just saying, well, first of all, we live in Mount Angel full-time. We have a home. We bought a home about 8 years ago down in Cutler City. My son, who's with me here in the back there, he was 5 at the time. He's 5 and a half. He's 14 now. He watched as we went through that whole process of redoing the home, remodeling. We bought the house next to us that was abandoned, knocked it down, kind of bettered the area on our street, spent well into 6 figures redoing things, and just to make it a nice area for us to come. Never had the intention of renting it. Never crossed my mind at the time. but knew that in the future, if my economic situation changed, I could do that. I mean, it's a vacation area, destination, Lincoln City is. And furthermore, it's an investment for my family. I put hard-earned resources into that. So I had the intention, obviously, of if I ever went to sell it, somebody that wanted to use it as a vacation rental could do so. So that was the understanding we went into. Just obviously, I mean, when you purchase a home, there should not be restrictions on the use of that. I have to say I'm very disappointed in how this process has gone. It's become very divisive. I think you can only come to, I've only had the luxury of coming to a couple of these meetings. My business travel has precluded me from attending many of the meetings. I actually watched the February 10th meeting by streaming video from my hotel room in Florida, and it was, I think, kind of right on with the progress. It took a little bit to calibrate, and then I was able to kind of keep pretty much hear most of the speaking and the testimony. But like I said, it's been very, very divisive, the process, pitting homeowners against each other. People, like in my area on Fleet Avenue in Cutler City, my side of the street is in the no zone, and the people across the street from me are in the yes zone. We're one block from Siletz Bay. So it's sort of strange. My neighbor across the street, it's like, it gets very odd, the way this has been done. Unfortunately, this is causing property owners to potentially have to resort to legal action just to protect their property value going forward. I heard someone say earlier today that it's like, there's this threat of people who are talking about legal action like that's some joke. This is no joke to me. I've spent resources in the last year. I got the first notice in May, and I spent plenty of money last year with my attorney discussing this. Have gotten multiple layers of legal advice on this. In the last meeting, there was a nice lady who asked, are you paying minimum wage to your house cleaners? Are you paying at least $10 an hour, I think she said. And it's really an uninformed statement. I pay $110 whether I stay in it or whether a property owner a guest stays in it. That's like $40 an hour. So it's sort of immaterial to the discussion. I pay yard maintenance and all that. I appreciated what the realtor and the real estate appraiser said in the last meeting about the plummet in property values. I think that's a very real fact. One other thing that was quite interesting to me, I had a city employee tell me, and if I mention this person's name, it'd be very well known to everyone in this room. A city employee said to me, the city needs to pass these VRD amendments and restrict vacation rentals so a person like me can afford to buy a house in Lincoln City. And the person said, if this is passed, it'll make more houses affordable for the working class. And I thought, that is so unbelievable that's the impetus almost for, part of the discussion that an actual city employee, a well-known person, would say something like that. And lastly, I'd like to point out, it's very interesting to me. Unfortunately, I believe that councilors, mayor, planning commission, you've received some very unfortunate advice from the city attorney. You came out in May with a notice of public hearing dates with a certain ordinance change, a land use change, and then you quickly realized, I think over 7 months, that you were going to get bombarded with Measure 49 claims and legal action. And lo and behold, in January, it's mailed, I think, December 18th, or sometime before Christmas, I think, another public notice came. I asked for a little extra time.
No, you do. We're giving you a letter.
I'll finish in less than 1 minute. You publish another one, totally retreating from the earlier one, knowing that you're going to get slapped with lawsuits and appeals. I just want to let you know, this hasn't gone unnoticed by citizens and property owners. It's absolutely unfathomable that you would go this far, spend this much money on totally inaccurate advice from a city attorney. I've talked with land use experts, land use attorneys, and Oregonians in Action is poised and ready. If this is passed, there will be an immediate appeal, and there's many people in the room that will join that.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. If you'll give the other letter over, that would be great.
Sure.
How about Spencer Clements?
He's decided he's my 14-year-old son.
He doesn't want to
speak, but he decided not to.
Okay. How about Elaine Peterson?
Hello, my name is Elaine Peterson. My husband and I live at 4618 Southwest Beach here in Lincoln City, and we also have another home here out in Gresham. I just wanted to state the problem that we see, and I thought I stated it many times, but I'll state it real clearly, that we live in an R1 zone, and we have full-time businesses operating in our R1 zone. So that is a problem. And it is commercial, it is business, because money is exchanging hands. Our expectation is that vacation rental businesses will not be allowed to continue to operate in R1 zones. To do otherwise would be reckless. If businesses can operate in R1 zones, then someone can make a residential house into a dental office or anything else. So vacation rentals can't continue to operate in R1 zones, and that requires some action from you. I believe in keeping it simple. I, too, do not like the yes-no. I think it's another layer of complexity. The original R1 zone description with accessory use is the simplest solution, I think. Everyone had the opportunity to read it. Everyone knew it was an R1 zone when they moved there. Accessory use does need to be defined. I agree with the 30-day limitation, and there will be a need for licenses, of course, and end-of-year reports, such as dates, number of persons, license plates, all those little things. We encourage you to institute stiff fines for violation. That's an effective deterrent. Take your time in making this decision. It needs to stand for 10 years or more. I encourage you to include a paragraph with your decision that describes your intent and your long-term broad vision for Lincoln City. In other words, why you made this decision. Then everyone would know. You've received a lot of data and opinions and recommendations. They are only recommendations. Reports from the consensus group, the planning commissioners, are also only recommendations to the decision makers. As elected officials, you can take some of their suggestions, all or none. People who feel threatened, especially financially, will often react with threats and intimidation. Sometimes it becomes harassment with the intent to get elected officials to resign or to discredit them using false facts. I'm also aware of the so-called compromise that was sent to you, which was not a compromise at all. It benefits two businessmen who want to buy some empty lots there. We know it's all about money, but it's also about your neighborhoods and the people who live in them. We're looking for a long-term solution that will attract full-time residents to Lincoln City. Balance.
Thank you. Gary Boy, is it?
My name is Gary Boyer. My mailing address is 9945 Southwest Hawthorne Lane in Portland, Oregon. So I just actually spent a week in Palm Springs at a vacation rental dwelling, and I can tell you that it being a business was the furthest thing from my mind as I sat by the pool and soaked up the sun. I I stand in firm opposition to the Alt 1 and 2 and the ordinances that are there. As I've talked to people on both sides of the aisle, I shouldn't even say that, just both sides of this issue, the part that I think that I have seen from everybody is we all agree on one simple thing: enforcement. Even when people have tried to talk about the defining of the problem, it has all come down to talking about garbage and parking and noise. And, you know, and certainly when looking at this issue and the proposals that are on the table right now, we're going to be revisiting this again, because you're going to have one side of the street where you have somebody who is behind it or somebody who's across from it who's not going to be happy that that's the occasion. So we're going to be back at this again in 18 months. I think we're also going to be seeing, we talked about the sunsetting clause that is part of this whole equation. And I think that, you know, granted, we're going to transform these neighborhoods and make them welcoming. Well, you're not going to put this issue to bed for 10 years, because in 2 or 3 years, there's still going to be people who have years left on their sunsetting clause, and that could go on for ages. So it's still not solving the issue, because those things could happen. People live a long time. You know, I wish that there was something that we could all come together on and that was not divisive, and I think that's very simple. I punish the heck out of people who do not do things properly. Fine people, set up the steep fines. I totally agree with you know, I live on, my house is on Southwest Coast Avenue behind people who are adamantly, you know, against VRDs. I think if somebody does something wrong, fine them $2,500, fine them $5,000, make it hurt. And the other part that I think would be an effective thing to put in place would be that every person who holds a VRD license has a $250 per year annual cost to hold their license. By my numbers, that would generate at least $100,000 in revenue to make it a self-sustaining, self-supporting position, so that it's not a drain on general fund budgets, but would take care of the enforcement issue. I think when we work together on those things, we really could come up with a solution that makes sense, takes care of itself, and pays for itself, and also gets to the root of the issue, so that we're not dealing with this over and over and over again. Thank you.
Thank you. Jerry Woods.
You're not going to go to 9 o'clock tonight, are you? My wife Barbara and I are homeowners of the Rhodes End neighborhood in Lincoln City, and we've owned the home since 2005. It's a second home. We don't represent the Rhodes End Improvement Association, and they don't represent us either. You know, there's problems everywhere, and the city actually has a process already for taking care of these problems. You have it on your website, actually. I don't think it's publicized well enough, but the first thing is to call a property manager, and if you can't do that, you try to call the owner. And if that doesn't work and it's really, really bad, you call 911. The city has a form online that you can fill out and send to Timothy Novak, who will follow up. I think that people should be careful that they aren't misusing this process, but you do have a process, and it's really a good one, and I like it. Being up here after Diane Dunlap and Carolyn Plummer and Jim Hoover and so many other people that are so good at what they've said, I don't know that I belong here. I don't see that there's that much of beef. You have a process. I'd like to make one last point, and that is that we did do a survey. My wife presented the thing 2 weeks ago. We didn't have a committee. We didn't sit back and say, let's talk about this. We went out and asked people, and the survey was scientific, and 76% of the people in Rhodes End own property said they don't want any caps. And I think that's very close to the 74% that the local newspaper came up with also. So we're not all that big.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
So, Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Oh, that's all right. Thank you.
Paul, is it Poyfair? Poyfair? Hey, good. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Paul Poyfair, and I reside at 777 Southwest 11th Drive. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with that, but that's right down next to where we have the improvement of the Canyon Park. I'm going to say about 20 years ago, I started looking at Lincoln City as a place that maybe I'd like to retire. I came, visit, brought my family, those kind of things, and we enjoyed it. We enjoyed it so much that we decided we're going to retire here. But we knew it was a resort city. We knew that when we came here, that we're going to probably have tourists that come just like us did. When we were looking at the place, that would probably want to live here. So we bought a house that had a great view, at a place that had like 6 parking places, and now the city has come and put in a great park there. Instead of 6, I got 30, or it seems like 30 parking places. And there's a lot of people, but it's well maintained, it's well taken care of, and it's what I expected when I came to Lincoln City. So in my retirement, it was kind of early, I kind of got bored. And so I decided that I'm going to do something besides sit in the house and look at the ocean. And so I went and started coaching basketball at Taft High School. And I started coaching there for a couple of years. And the thing that became real obvious to me in that time period was that the city doesn't have an industry other than tourism. And as I've been listening to this, and I kind of did, I also have to say that I bought the Captain Cook Inn. I'm the owner of the Captain Cook Inn. And I bought that basically to take advantage of the things that I like and watch it. And so I started thinking, as I saw this, there's a lot of transient kids who are coming through my basketball program and leaving, coming and going. And I thought we really need to stabilize this environment. But in the same token, I'm in a unique position. I'm in a position where I benefit, maybe, by having a VRD restriction. But on the other side of that is that I might suffer also in watching people move in, like a lot of the people that have testified here. I, like you guys, have been listening to it, and I've been trying to say, what do I really believe? Well, 2 things. One is, I believe in the health of the community. We shouldn't be trying to regulate. We shouldn't be trying to restrict. We should be trying to enforce laws we have. We should be taking care of those that are breaching those regulations that have been set up, and we should be pursuing those people in the form of penalties, fees, in the form of restrictions in terms of denials, maybe of their contracts or suspensions of their licenses. We have the laws in the book. Everything is fine. I've come to the conclusion it really just needs to be left like it is.
Thank you, sir. James Code.
My name is James Code. I own property at 3228 Northeast 26th Street. I'm here just to, again, repeat what everyone else is talking about. I still don't understand what the problem we're trying to solve. I own a VRD on Devil's Lake. I've been operating there with a local business, Beachfront Rentals, for 3 years. We abide by all the laws and rules. We have ample parking. We have, all my garbage cans have holders so that the wind can't blow them over. We have security that comes and ensures that we don't have noise. All the things that we'd be concerned about for a community, beachfront and myself are making sure that happens. So again, what I'm seeing happening here is, one, I don't know really, we haven't measured and defined what the problem is, and all these solutions that are happening, as good-natured as everyone is in trying to figure out what they're trying to do, all of those solutions basically come to me and say, I'm sorry, you don't get to have a VRD because you're on the lake. When here I am, abiding by all the rules and everything that the city has set forth, because right now all the lake frontage, I've asked if we are going forward with yes to no, that lake frontage should be treated like oceanfront. But my main point is I still don't understand what it is we're trying to solve, and do any of these solutions really address that. All I know is it's penalizing me and my family when here we are doing everything to uplift the city and act in good faith. And that's really what it boils down to.
You did a good job.
Thank you.
Thank you. Keith Killian?
My name is Keith Klein. I'm a vacation rental dwelling owner, 1313 Southwest Coast Avenue. Came down here with my family shortly after retired in 2007. We fell in love with it and did some scratch on the back of the numbers. The only way we can make this work is if we rent it out part-time, but the place will presumably appreciate in value, and eventually my wife and I will be able to come down and live here part-time and hand it off to the kids. Prior to that, we had often gone to vacation rentals on the East Coast, where we lived for a while, and then on the West Coast, and always appreciated the journals that guests would leave, because people can't normally come down to places like this and just have some good quality family time. Also stayed at many nice condominium hotels and so forth, and it's just a different market. Sometimes you want to stay at a motel, sometimes I don't think it's competing. But ever since we, and I paid more for this place, we paid for our principal residence. So ever since then, I've seen the property value go down, mostly because of just property houses prices in general, but also it would seem to be some kind of growing hostility towards VRDs, which I really didn't understand either. But it just seems like it's been growing over the last several years. And I said, well, and we never had any significant problems with our place, and I think in general, you look at the entries in our log, people really appreciate it like we did. In the meantime, I appreciate what you all are doing, spending your personal time here after regular work hours, and so forth. And so I presume your honorable people want to do the right thing. I thought it was admirable that you put together the consensus committee, and I was saying, well, they'll figure out what the problem is and hopefully come up with some solution that appeases people. We can have some stability moving forward and move on. I would hope that out of deference to their efforts, you at least tell them why their recommendations don't hold muster or cause them other problems, if that is in fact the case. But in any event, whatever you do, I hope you're just very clear on what again, the problem is, because it's being in limbo is harmful, and like I said, I was hoping to hand something down to my family, investing in the future here, and that's in jeopardy now, and it's kind of scary, and it almost seems un-American that in some ways you come here, it seemed to open, environment, a good thing for everybody, a win-win, and then for some unforeseen reason, this like I said, some type of hostility, and that's all. But thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. Zachary Poole.
Good evening. Zachary Poole, 3898 Northwest Keel Avenue, Lincoln City, Oregon. I'm here tonight, surprisingly enough, to talk to you about vacation rentals. I've been operating a vacation rental located at the corner of 39th and Keel for the approximately past 5 years. I've also had the privilege of connecting to this community through the Pig and Pancake restaurant for the past approximately 8 years. While doing so, it has been a real privilege to get to know so many patrons, locals, and tourists alike. It has also been a privilege to know and lead a great team of over 30 employees here. Being a part of these people's lives often involves knowing their kids and feeling a real sense of community, and I think we've heard testimony previous to that. I am very concerned and involved with the well-being of each of our team members and their future. In my opinion, the town needs responsibly ran vacation rentals. As they have in the past contributed to our local economy, they are most likely a large part of the future. I talk to patrons all the time. They seem to be over here in 3 distinct groups. Those that are just day tripping, staying in a hotel, or staying in a vacation rental. Now, clearly, there needs to be a balance in the community, good policy for local residents. There should be standards. We need standards, and I believe this wholeheartedly. Currently, there are standards, and they are being enforced to a large degree. We have a number of rules and regulations in place now. A big part of the consensus committee was everyone coming to the table with all the data and information and arriving at a recommendation. Was the recommendation perfect? I doubt it was perfect, but it represented a compromise, and sometimes in life we have to compromise. In regards to Alt 1 and Alt 2, I find it hard to quantify the ramifications and the language in those documents. It leaves much to be decided and creates many moving targets for the future. Vacation rentals are important. I believe I received the following charts at one of the consensus committee meetings that I attended, which enabled me to draw the conclusion that vacation rentals are an important component to our local economy. As a restaurant operator, I tend to be sensitive to the amount of people coming into the restaurant and out of the restaurant and how their experience was. Of those 3 things, they're all equally important, and with or without volume, the restaurant business is already a very tough business. The August 2011 survey indicated that there were 2,044 motel rooms from 48 buildings. The same survey also indicated that there were 1,010 VRD rooms out of 316 or 326 VRDs. And I'm not guessing at the 316 or the 326 number that was in the report that I just drew from. But I don't believe that those numbers included the VRDs that were located in Rhodes End. I naturally tend to get concerned for the well-being of the town and the tourism component here that Lincoln City has worked so hard to build. So if policy gets passed that does not allow the number of people to vacation and stay in town as they have in the past, then one could only conclude that the aggregate tourism dollars spent in town will decline. So since VRD rooms represent roughly 1/3 of the total available rooms in the market, which we can define as Lincoln City, any significant change will change the aggregate tourism dollars spent in this town.
Are you wrapping that up? Sure.
Yes.
Quickly.
In general, this most likely could mean fewer jobs, fewer shops, and fewer restaurants available to everyone in Lincoln City. So, I am here tonight to humbly ask the council to please consider funding or commissioning a comprehensive economic analysis for the future of this town in regards to vacation rentals. These ordinances that are on the table will likely chart the course of economic development and tourism for the city for many years to come. I am humbly asking you to please take a measured, responsible approach to the future of this great city and its citizens.
Thank you for your time. Great. Thank you. Brian Green.
I'm Brian Green, 1490 Northeast Lake Drive, Lincoln City. I've just handed the city recorder some written testimony that's different from what I have to say tonight. I'd like to address the highly burdensome requirements for obtaining a VROZ overlay under the proposed Alt 1. I'm not sure everyone understands what you would be requiring if that would be adopted. Under that proposal, an owner could have a VRD if and only if, and this is the part we do understand, that owner could get the surrounding owners in an area of at least 1 acre in size, and that would have to be in an area of 50 by 100 lots. That'd have to be 9 owners. If that owner can get those other owners to unanimously agree to request the overlay, then if he could ever get past, anyone could ever get past that requirement, and this is the part I think is not well understood, that owner must apply for rezoning or comprehensive plan redesignation. That's a very complicated process. The Planning Commission, well, first an application has to be sent to the Planning Commission. That's a complicated and difficult item to prepare. The Planning Commission either considers that, may hold public hearings, may not, but eventually has to report to the City Council, and the City Council must hold a public hearing on that application for one VRD. Now, something tells me that whoever proposed that didn't think there'd be too many applications, and maybe it's because of the unanimous owner requirement. But in that process, the applicant has to demonstrate compliance with the comprehensive plan goals, policies, the land use map, and more likely than not, statewide land use planning goals and policies. Then the City Council must actually pass a new ordinance approving the application, because you're amending the zoning ordinance. You're doing a redesignation of the comprehensive plan, or the map, excuse me. So given those difficult standards, it becomes pretty easy for planning commissioners and city councilors to deny these applications. It's a pretty subjective process, and it can't help but appear that it's the intent of suggesting such a burdensome process to eliminate VRDs almost completely. It's overkill. It's just overkill. So please don't do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Karen Scretton.
Hi, I'm Karen Scretton from A1 Beach Rentals and the Whistling Winds Motel. And these are questions I'd like as part of the public hearing. They were read or asked by Jim Hoover. Once a problem with VRDs is identified, does it occur more often in VRD, vacation homes, or monthly rentals and apartments? Without the problem with VRDs identified, how can the council ask the public which proposed ordinance they like best? How can the council ask which solution is best if they don't know the problem? What does the city staff dislike about the Blue Ribbon Committee report to compel 2 alternate versions to be created? What type of solution includes 95% of the problem. What is the problem? Would we lose all our VRD visitors, or would they rent hotel rooms instead? Was the committee unable to identify a problem with VRDs? Why didn't the committee write down the problem with VRDs that these proposed ordinance try to solve? And shouldn't we ask the people who spent considerable time working on the problem to tell us what it is? I support the consensus group recommendations. And on a very personal note, I feel as if I'm in the fight of my life. Most sitting in the audience would agree. Our retirement, livelihood, and investment depends on the outcome. I have great respect for the VRD owners I represent and the ones I've met through this process. They love Lincoln City, are proud of their homes, and excited to show guests fun things to do and restaurants and stores to visit. On rainy days, I always recommend parents take their kids to the community center. I heard about the naked visitor, and I'm sure that's not the norm. That you would remember that, though. More often, you see parents with kids and kites and sand pails in tow, and those are visitors. And that's a lovely sound for most people. That's really good. They are so excited to be here. Gosh, you'd hate to limit that. I think there can be some, things to monitor, and I think that a good job is being done. I think Tim Novak has said that repeatedly. I don't hear from him very often, but I know he mentioned that in my renewal letter. Thank you, well done. So please consider those things. Thank you.
Thank you. David Hequeso? I'll let you correct me.
You got me there? My name is David Holquist. I live at 2022 Northeast 21st Street, Lincoln City, Oregon. And I was here probably a year ago. It seems like this deja vu as far as the whole evening goes in support of the VRD deal there. And I worked for, over the years, I've worked for a lot of absentee homeowners and that type of thing, and I have them, they'll ask me over the phone what's going on down there in Lincoln City, and I don't know what to say, as far as what I've read into it. I don't personally own a VRD. To me, they've helped me a lot over the years as far as employment. But I guess in a nutshell, what I'd like to see probably, that's the way I felt when I walked through the door here, and I still kind of feel the same way, is that the yes-no zone is probably a workable deal with maybe, I don't know what the cap is on the vacation rental time, this 30-day. I hear something about 30 days, and I have people asking me about that. Well, it doesn't seem like an awful lot of time for somebody to, there's some people that have some pretty major investments in their homes here in Lincoln City that we all know. They took a shack of a house and turned it into an oceanfront, a beautiful place, and their permits and taxes and everything they got to recoup out of that. How long is that going to take? It's pretty tough to do on a 30-day shot. But anyway, I guess what I'm thinking is what they should probably do is if they can't do the yes-no deal, is just take everything back to the way it has been for like 25 years. And that's just the way I feel. I wish I had written something up before I came down here, but I just wanted to come in and
that's fine.
In representation of the VRD. But that's about it, guys.
Okay, thank you very much.
You did a good job.
Lena Hellquist. Your handwriting is so much better.
I appreciate getting a chance to talk with you guys. I agree pretty much with everything my husband had to say. I'm a full-time resident here. I support the yes/no vote. I no caps on rentals, so I support the consensus group. I don't see where there's all these big problems, personally. I work in a coffee shop and a local shop here in town, and I know how much, and I know you guys are tired of hearing this, but I know how much our livelihood depends on this, depends on having people that can rent. And you know, honestly, people that come down with 3 or 4 kids need a place where they can fix their meals, fix some of their meals at home there, you know. Have one of the kids watch the others while the adults go out for dinner now and then, you know. But I mean, it's just so spendy anyway for people to be able to get away for a little while. Dave and I used to live right there by what have you, across from the 34th Avenue beach access. And I remember just seeing people come in groves with their kids and that type thing and get out, and I just thought, how lucky I am to live here, but how lucky they are to be able to come and visit here. And, you know, I honestly think if people can't get a house here to stay in, they'll go to Manzanita, they'll go to Newport, they'll go wherever else that they can get a house to rent. I just hope that you guys take that into consideration and all the jobs and that depend on this. Okay? Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I know you're tired of hearing all that.
Oh, no.
No, we're not.
Nope.
We're not
Nope.
tired of it.
All right. Leslie Green.
My name is Leslie Green. I live at 1490 Northeast Lake Drive, Lincoln City. I own a real estate company in Lincoln City. My husband and I own a vacation rental. I want to tell you, it's not about what's good for vacation homes, what we're talking about tonight. It's what's good for Lincoln City. And I believe the city has taken effective steps to correct any past problems with vacation rentals. And I worry that the city is now pursuing a course of action that will discourage or eliminate VRDs, and I'm convinced that would be really bad for the economy of Lincoln City and for real estate values as a whole. Lincoln City is well on its way to creating a hostile environment for vacation rental dwellings. I don't understand why VRDs are treated any differently than single-family homes. Their use is 100% entirely residential. Guests use the homes for sleeping, bathing, cooking, and socializing, just as any other home is used. Vacation homes should not be subject to any more scrutiny or rules than owner-occupied homes, second homes that are used only by the owner, or monthly rental homes. It seems so short-sighted that instead of celebrating the economic benefit VRDs bring our city, VRDs have been vilified and forced to defend their very right to exist. I think a clear measure of the hostile vacation rental environment in Lincoln City is the huge amount of time that has been wasted on this issue. Starting last year with the consensus group in the city council meetings, and this year with gratuitous new proposed Alt 1 and Alt 2 ordinances drawn up by the city attorney, planning commission meetings, and city council meetings, after hiring a mediator and then ignoring the consensus group recommendations. It sure feels like someone has an axe to grind. What in the world is the city afraid of? More visitors? The 2 new surprise optional ordinances are extraordinarily hard to understand. My husband, who you just heard from, thank goodness, has gone through them and figured out that it's going to be a real burden. But I've been a real estate broker for 30 years, and it was a puzzle to me to read through those things. The alternative proposals appear to intend to discourage VRDs. They would add a huge bureaucratic burden to the City Council and staff by requiring multiple decisions for multiple property owners. It seems extremely burdensome and overreaching. The proposals for the VRAS and the ERAS zones seem especially onerous and hostile. It would require a group of 10 VRDs to band together in order to apply for the favor of being zoned for vacation rentals with a special small vacation rental overlay zone. That means one home in the middle of a group of 19 could effectively veto a VRAS application. It also means for every group of 10 lots that can agree to apply for the VRAS zone, the City Council would be required to devote more time and resources to multiple decisions. It's designed to result in a patchwork of vacation rental overlay zones in the midst of the exclusive residential zones. So unfriendly to VRDs, it's clearly designed to discourage them. I wanted to tell you a personal story. May I tell you a personal story?
Can you take 30 seconds, please?
This is about my daughter when she was 3 years old. She said something point blank that was obviously wrong, and we said to her, well, what about this? Well, what about that? And have you thought about this other thing? And she put her hands on her hip and she said, you're changing my mind. I hope that through this process some minds will be changed. I hope the City Council and the City Manager will realize VRDs are a boon to the City of Lincoln City and are not villains. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Debbie Williams.
Debbie Williams, 2625 Southwest Dune. I'm sure you're all getting really tired of seeing me up here. And I wish I could be as funny and humorous as my husband, but I just wasn't born with that. Anyway, I did send an email in. I don't know if it was received. But as part of the consensus committee that met for many, many hours, I'd like to address the ordinance recommendations they were proposing tonight, which I am in support of, all except the yes-no zone. I realize that the yes-no zone puts the city in jeopardy of Measure 49 claims, which was, I don't think that was our intent at the time that we came up with that, and actually many on the consensus committee feel that way. I would recommend following Newport's lead on this, who have changed their respective restrictive VRD ordinances in July of 2012, allowing VRDs in all zones with no number of days restrictions. And I'm going to read just real quickly out of that ordinance. The City of Newport Planning Commission and an ad hoc work group of community volunteers completed a comprehensive review of these code sections and determined that amendments were needed because the existing rules are difficult to interpret and enforce, and in the case of conditional uses, have led to inconsistent application and implementation of the requirements over time. The City of Newport Planning Commission and the ad hoc work group further find that creating clear and objective criteria to allow vacation rentals and bed and breakfast facilities in all residential zones is a more effective method of achieving the purpose of the regulations than existing requirements that limit vacation rentals or bed and breakfasts using through the imposition of discretionary criteria or arbitrary occupancy limits. The ad hoc work group, in consultation with the Newport Planning Commission, well, then it goes down into how many times they met, very consistent with the consensus committee. And this was signed by the mayor and the city recorder. And then I want to address just a couple of other things that were brought up tonight. So the person that brought up the fact that you could rent homes in Newport 10 times a year is incorrect. That has been changed. There are no longer those limitations. They realize the economic benefit of vacation rental dwellings. Based on the the recent census poll, there are 9,800 homes in Lincoln City, of which there are approximately 320 VRDs. I do not think this includes Rhodes End because it was done prior to Rhodes End being part of the city. That makes our VRDs 3% of our population of homes. Residential use is not farm use, and I would tell the lady that would like to have chickens, she can have up to 3, and you can actually have a pony in the city if you use it for a what do they call that? A service animal, yes, thank you. Our vacation rentals are not businesses. Please just let me finish this because I want to correct some things that were said. They are not businesses because they are not open to the public. Nobody can come to my vacation rental door, knock on the door, and say, I want a room. That is not open for public business. It is a residential use. No more or no less than a 30-day rental that also needs a business license. Okay? Let's see. I would also suggest, with the recommendations of the consensus committee, and they didn't really address this, a best practices class, which there are several of us on the committee that would love to teach it. I would volunteer myself. And the last thing is I have recently become the managing principal broker for Prudential Northwest Properties. In the last 6 weeks, there have been 3 sale fails specifically based on the purchasers being able to use the homes as vacation rentals. Those purchasers have gone elsewhere, and in fact, one of them I know has purchased in Newport. Do we really want people going to other communities to invest their money?
Great. Thank you, Debbie. That concludes the sign-up sheets. Thank you. I hate asking this, but are there anybody who didn't sign up that just is dying to talk? Please, come forward in my welcoming way.
My name is Jim Dunlap. I live at 1118 Northeast Alder Tree Lane here in Lincoln City. And if I came in here and suffered with this brace on tonight, you're going to hear from me a little bit. I just like to say I appreciate council members. I've been involved in a lot of things in my life. I'm a professional business person. With my wife, she'll hit me again with this brace if I don't say this right. But we have commercial businesses as well as a vacation rental home. And I said this once before in a meeting that I attended before you, that you're regular people just like me, and you like living in this town just like me. And I assume that you want to stay here and would like to have your family and friends come visit you. A lot of us don't have big enough homes to house them, and vacation rentals are an option. I would just like to put it before you to stick with your original agreement. I've been here a long, long time, and that original agreement was a 3-strike rule, 1, 2, 3, and you're out. You've already got set up rules that are easy and simple to get rid of a vacation rental that's not playing by the rules. It's real simple, real easy, without attributing to all these other things that have came up. So I'd just like to urge you to go back to your original consensus of the original rules and use them. They worked. They're not broke. And for a few screaming people that want no VRDs, I think for the better of our whole community, we need the business. We need that economic development. And we need people to be buying food, buying things in our community and coming to see us. Otherwise, we'll dry right up because we'd have no business, so to speak, of other than them. So I suggest that you strongly consider that. And tonight I ask you to vote back to your original system and forgo all the add-ons that you've been having for years and years and years, and go back to your keep it simple, stupid rules. And it will work very easily, and it always has. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else? Thank you. I do have to ask, is there any comment from representatives of public agencies? Seeing none. Kathy, were there any written lists that didn't get into packet that we need to read in? Just the short list here? I do need to read another short list of written communication we got from Victoria Reagan, Carolyn Glasgow again, Joe Hinton, David Hawker, Judy and John Piper, Jean Scrutton, Shirley Bray, and Susan Walker were written comments that went into the public record. I guess at this time, Council, this would be discussion whether to close the public hearing.
I move to close the public hearing.
Kathy's even got us on a timeline, huh? If I could point out and asking you to amend...
The record would remain open, I think it's 7 days is the requirement.
Ways and Judicial, you can pick a number.
Actually, how about noon Wednesday, March 5th? So the written record would say open until noon Wednesday, March 5th.
That's fine with me. That would be included in my motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion with a second to close the public hearing and keeping the written record open until noon Wednesday, March 5th. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, hear nay. Hearing none. Great. Thank you, gentlemen. At this time, then, we have another public hearing.
Your Honor, before you move on, later on the agenda, I believe you have deliberations on the yes-no zone. And since you're leaving the record open on these matters and you just continued it, do you want to just maybe at least announce that you're going to be continuing those deliberations to the March meeting?
That would be great. I'd be happy to do. For those who are staying with bated breath, waiting for the deliberation that's not going to happen, and that's down on item I-12 for the council's deliberations. That'll be continued at least until March 10th at the council meeting at this time and place. All right, we have a public hearing then on this will be to receive public comment on proposed legislative amendments regarding the clear vision triangle for intersections, alleys, and driveways. Planning file ZOA 2013-02. This was continued from February 10th to tonight. Not yet. Now I'm going to get the script. So please bear with me. The public hearing is now open for the purpose of considering amendments to the zoning ordinance. The proposal is identified as file ZOA 2013-02. Could we go ahead and leave quickly, if you could, and quietly, so we could carry on? Thank you. And the City of Lincoln City has initiated the proposed amendments. The proposed ordinance amends Section 17.52.060 to create a new definition for clear vision triangle for intersections, alleys, and driveways. The ordinance allows exceptions and lists features and improvements that may be in the clear vision area. The Planning Commission held a public hearing on this matter on January 7, 2014, and forwarded a recommendation for approval as outlined to the cover memo from staff. The City Council's role in this legislative process is to consider any written or oral testimony as well as information from staff and make a final decision as to the ordinance amendments or new ordinances. The City Council may adopt the Planning Commission's recommendation, may adopt a different recommendation, or may take other action, including declining to make a decision. Are there any objections to the Council's jurisdiction? Councilors, are there any abstentions or disqualifications based on conflict of interest? The substantive criteria that apply to this hearing include the statewide planning goals, the city's comprehensive plan, and the unamended portions of the city's zoning ordinance. Comments and testimony should be directed to these criteria or to other criteria that you believe apply to the subject of this hearing. Before the staff presents a report, I would like to summarize the public hearing procedures which have been adopted by City Council. A brochure outlining these procedures is at the entrance to the council chambers. The staff will present a report and respond to any questions. After that, any person may speak up to 3 minutes. The city recorder will use the light system. If the council has questions, your time responding to any questions will not be counted as your time. If you wish to speak, please write your name and mailing address clearly on the sign-up list at the entrance. Please speak directly into the microphone and begin by stating your name. It is not necessary to state your address into the video record, but please be sure you have provided your address to the recorder for notification purposes. If you also have written testimony to submit into the record, please provide a copy to the recorder. Will the staff please present its report?
Good evening. I'm Deborah Martson. I am the senior planner at Lincoln City, and I am presenting the Clear Vision Ordinance to you this evening. The proposed amendments address a purpose statement. It adds one where there hasn't been one previously. It talks about street intersections and also driveways, and in the past we have only had regulations for commercial driveways in our ordinance, and we can talk a little bit about that later. Measure from the property lines as we do now. Size and shape of triangles and exemptions. Exemptions are new. We don't have any in our ordinance now for the Clear Vision triangle. Okay, first of all, the purpose statement. To allow drivers and pedestrians who are stopped or approaching with caution to see intersecting traffic in time to avoid collisions. And, it may seem obvious, but I think the part about stopped or approaching with caution implies that we're not talking about somebody being able to proceed at a full speed through an intersection, because that would require a very large clear vision area. And in fact, in a place where I used to work, we had quite a discussion about that, because the engineer wanted to have a 75-foot clear vision triangle so that he could continue on at 30 miles an hour without slowing. So that is a significant thing. Another thing that I would mention here is that traffic includes not just the motor traffic, but also pedestrians or whoever's on the sidewalk. As I mentioned earlier, the proposed amendment includes a clear vision triangle at residential driveways as well as commercial driveways and intersections. We talked about this a year ago with the Planning Commission, and there was a difference of opinion about whether that was important. A couple of the commissioners felt strongly that too much obstruction at driveways was a hazard, and relayed stories of their own about having problems proceeding through driveways, not knowing whether somebody was going to come out at the last minute. So this is something that basically I'm asking you to consider. It's a policy decision. It would, of course, make things safer if we had clear vision at driveways. It also is going to require more setback in a lot of cases, and of course we are going to have a lot of non-conforming issues. Because we do have exemptions in the ordinance, it isn't quite as serious, I guess, as it might be, but anyway, please keep that in mind as we go through the ordinance. Options, of course, are to have clear vision at all driveways except residential, on local streets, or only on commercial. So in your discussion, please keep that in mind. I have gotten some feedback about measuring from the edge of pavement as opposed to measuring from the property lines. We have always in the past measured from the property lines, and that is because it is clear to us where the property lines are. They're defined legally. The edge of pavement may seem more obvious when you're on the ground, but it doesn't take into consideration that that line could move. And it could move if we had a sidewalk, but it also means that the part defined by the edge of pavement includes a lot of right-of-way. And right-of-way is really not for private use. It's for the public. And so when we do include, okay, this is an example. The red triangle here is if we measured from the edge of this motor lane. The yellow triangle is if we measured from the right-of-way line or the property line, which are both the same. In this case, I'm not sure what this one's. This one I want to show you is if this white line here is represents a sidewalk that goes in later. So if we have required a setback based on the edge of pavement, and now the edge of pavement is closer by 5 feet, it's going to mean that we're not going to have much visibility here. And if we had allowed fencing or trees based on a clear vision triangle on the edge of roadway, you can see that it would block the view of anyone on the sidewalk and actually impede the view of people in the motorized roadway. I do want to emphasize the size and the shape of the triangle. We are talking about a longer, narrower triangle rather than the 30-foot isosceles triangle we have now. And the reason that we're bringing this up at all is because we've had some issues with that. We have had people running into problems with the deeper triangle cutting into where they'd like to put their house or where they want to put their driveway. And so that's why we're bringing it forward. We've had a couple variance requests, and we've had issues with contractors who have come to the counter. So I want to emphasize that the current triangle is this 30-foot triangle that you see here, this solid triangle. And that cuts a lot deeper into a lot than what we are now proposing. I want you to keep in mind we have a variety of intersections. And so I do want to apologize before I go any further that there's no way to show this, so it's going to show up on streaming video. So people who are watching this later may have to go to the report itself to see these diagrams. But I think it's clear enough for the council, and it's important to our discussion. So first of all, we have to define what is point A, because I use point A in defining the triangle. And point A on a 90-degree corner is pretty obvious. It's the intersection of the two property lines. But point A on a curved lot, we have to use the tangents, an extension tangent to the curve. So this is point A, and when we talk about measuring now, we measure from point A back 30 feet in each direction, and then we have the third side connecting the other two. So what we're talking about now, instead of 30 feet in each direction, is we're talking about 10 feet on a controlled street. And by controlled, I mean a street that has a stop sign. So here's your stop sign. 10 feet back is about where the driver of the car would be sitting. So there's basically what we're saying is there really isn't a reason to go back further than where the driver's sitting at a stop sign. So, but this does then allow a lot longer view, because we're saying that it would be 50 feet in this direction. So the driver's sitting here, the driver can see a long way up the street and can see a long way the other direction as well. So we have a shallower, longer triangle. On uncontrolled streets, you have people approaching in both cases, so from both directions, and no one is stopped. So in that case, we need people to have a clear vision, regardless of which street they're going to be meeting at. Oh, and let me talk about why I picked this shape of triangle, and I did a lot of research looking at other clear vision triangles around the state, and they went from a 65-foot triangle in Lake Oswego to no triangle anymore in Portland. And so I ended up using a safety manual that was prepared by Moji Taluku, I think his name is. He is a professor at Portland State. He's a safety expert and a traffic engineer. And he had a rather complicated way of calculating the triangle, and it required going out and at each corner. But as I applied those to some of our intersections around town, it seemed pretty clear that what was effective was to have a triangle this shape. And so I thought it would be much easier to standardize it so anyone looking at the code would be able to understand how it applied to their property. Okay, so here's where we come into the driveway or alley. Do we want to have a similar triangle at driveways? Clearly, they would be crossing property lines because we do allow driveways to come right up to the property line. When we took this to the Planning Commission, the Planning Commission this year talked about this and decided that maybe we should reduce it to 7.5 so it is no deeper along the driveway than the required setback of the house. But we still have the issue of then needing to have room, 20-foot room for the car, for a parking space, so that it does not encroach or block this clear view triangle that we've set up. So anyway, the Planning Commission did make a recommendation to include the driveway or alley, and but to reduce it to 7.5 foot on this particular dimension. One thing I overlooked when I brought this forward was we still have a vision clearance for commercial in another section of the code, and so depending on what you do this evening, we will probably want to make a correction in that in a future ordinance where maybe our omnibus ordinance, where we're kind of cleaning up various parts of the code. But in this case, this is in the parking and loading part of the code. It says that service drive should have, and it defines a 20-foot triangle from the center line of the driveway. And this demonstrates what this would mean. At the Safeway entrance, the red triangle is what that defines, so it really doesn't even get past the driveway itself. The yellow, on the other hand, is what our proposed ordinance would require for clear vision. And Safeway, in this case, certainly meets what we're requiring in the proposal.
And that's 50 foot by 10 foot again?
Yes.
Or is it 7.5 feet?
No.
10 feet.
Well, this is 10, yeah. This is 10 foot by 50 foot. The 7.5 was proposed in the recommendation from the Planning Commission, but I haven't actually changed the ordinance the way it's drafted. I'm leaving.
And was that for private driveways, 7.5?
I think they were thinking of private driveways, and I don't recall that they made a distinction between commercial, but they may have, but I don't recall that. All right, so exemptions are something we're adding to the ordinance that we don't have now. And the standard is the same. Clear vision triangles shall be free of obstructions from 2.5 to 8 feet, and now we have exceptions. And we have a number of exceptions here, and I do qualify those exceptions by saying that if both the city engineer and the planning director agree that it's an unacceptable hazard, then this cannot be an exception. But in most cases, existing trees, if they're limbed to 8 feet, topographical features, we have a lot of changes in topography, slopes on our corners. We have non-conforming existing buildings. We have existing fences. And we're proposing that open fences that are at least 75% open, and that might be a railing fence or a chain link fence, as opposed to a solid wood fence. If they're 75% open, you can see the movement through the fence. Existing driveways, possibly new driveways, but not required parking. Right now, we haven't been allowing a parking space in a clear vision area, because clearly if somebody's parking on it, you're not going to be able to see. Existing utilities, we have some of those in our clear vision. Public traffic signs, your stop sign's going to have to be in there by definition. And also in the ordinance, we allow that the minimum clear vision area may be modified by the city engineer. And this is one thing that the commission also made a recommendation for a modification. We had a gentleman come up who has an existing building in a clear vision area. He was concerned that what we thought was going to allow for some helpful discretion on the part of the city engineer could actually mean that she would decide he needed to move his building. So we clarified that with the blue change, and you can see that, I think, in the copy in front of you. But it states that existing legally non-conforming buildings on permanent foundations may remain within the clear vision areas, and then the items only on that following list could be varied by the city engineer if it's an unacceptable hazard. So that's the clarification that the Planning Commission wanted to make sure you heard. I believe that's all I have. Do you have any questions?
Councilors?
Yeah.
We're proposing no parking in the clear vision triangle and private driveways.
We don't allow parking in clear vision triangles at street intersections now. And the question is whether or not you want to impose a clear vision triangle on a driveway. And if you do, then we would not want to have people parking in it.
And would that require yellow curbs at all private driveways and intersections?
Well, normally when we use the clear vision triangle, it's when somebody comes in with a proposal to build something or place something in there. As far as enforcement, and this brings up an interesting question, we had a comment from one citizen. It was Bob Hunt. This most recently, and I think we have another one that I included maybe in your packet or attached to a Planning Commission report. But Bob talked about two things regarding clear vision triangles. One was enforcement of existing ordinances and keeping that area between the fog line or the edge of the roadway and the property line or the existing right-of-way line clear of obstructions so that pedestrians can use that area, whether or not there's a sidewalk. And he contends that is, and I do believe I included this in the report, that is, according to ORS, pedestrian area. And so if we have a lot of shrubs and trees and things like that in there, that can obstruct pedestrians and bicycles or anyone who's using the sidewalk. So enforcement is an issue that we're grappling with now with Harbor, with that project. And we have non-conforming situations all over town. We're talking about ways to be proactive in our enforcement, and so that's an issue that we're going to have to deal with, regardless. The other issue that Bob Hunt brought up was the placement of stop lines, and in relationship to stop signs and in relationship to where the actual intersection of the streets are. And I've talked to the city engineer about that, and she said that, we are going to look into that. We know that there are some issues with that. It's a little more complicated because if we were to grind out white lines where they are now, that actually damages the pavement. So preferably, she would like to deal with it as we make improvements to existing streets, like with overlays and so forth, and repainting, restriping. So as far as the yellow line, I am not so sure about that, but that probably would be the best way to keep people from parking in that. But actually, the yellow line has to do with people parking in the right-of-way, and the clear vision triangle at the driveway would be on private property. So the one thing that we'd have to make sure is that the cars were parking, at least, I know this isn't ideal, because we're not going to be watching people all the time to see if they're parking outside the clear vision triangle. But I thought at least what we could do is require that their required parking space, if they're calling that their required parking space in their driveway, would be outside the clear vision triangle. So they would have at least 20 feet inside the property before they got to the clear vision.
Bob also talked about outside lateral lines of shoulders. In addition to lateral lines of the roadway? I'll talk to Bob.
Okay.
All right.
He couldn't be here this evening, but,
all right.
Yeah.
Henry, you had a question?
Yeah, I'm thoroughly lost in this one.
Okay.
Yeah, it just doesn't, I hear too many options here that we may be in problems later on with what we're going to enforce, what we're not going to enforce. And, what's going to be grandfathered in, what's not going to be grandfathered in. I've got a driveway in the back of my house. It used to be a driveway. The garage used to be on that side of the house. I remodeled the house, and now it's on the front side of the house. There's pampas grass growing right up to the, property line. Probably sometimes past a little bit and things like this. That means I'd have to cut down pampas grass. So the person next to me who has a small house there has a driveway so he can see down the street. Am I getting this right? If you got 10 feet by 25 feet, you measure 10 feet back, you're supposed to be able to see 25 feet down the road. That's not going to happen. And there's quite a few places in my neighborhood that's not going to happen. And you're telling me now we want to pass an ordinance that we don't know how we're going to enforce, how the 25 feet and 10 feet is going to work. I'm losing it here.
Well, the one thing that we really are trying to correct here is the shape of the triangle. And as I said when I started, the issue of whether or not we want to apply it to residential driveways is, a question for you. But the problem that we have had, and the reason we're bringing the ordinance forward, is because we don't think that the 30-foot triangle at street intersections is the most effective, and we think it's more intrusive into private property. So we would like to change the shape of that triangle. And so I think that the exceptions that I've listed here are trying to be realistic in terms of what we allow, what we don't allow in town, and what we can't avoid in some cases, like the topography, for instance. People have nice stone retaining walls that are in the clear vision triangle in some cases at some corners. Now, there won't be probably as many violations if we reduce and change the shape of the triangle, but we still are going to have some. And one thing I want to talk about, too, is that if we were to widen the triangle in order to allow better visibility, or if we maintained the 30-foot triangle and enforced it strictly, we would be taking out and really clearing a lot of corners that do have obstructions in them now, and I think that they do lend something to the character of the community. So it's a balancing act. If we were to clear the wide corners, like for instance in Lincoln Palisades, some of those corners there are clear. They're very open, and you can see, and I think as a result maybe cars drive faster in that neighborhood. That's the trade-off. And in some of the older parts of town where it's more closed in with topography and landscaping, then we're forced to slow down because we really can't see. I think maybe that was, and I don't know the reasoning behind Portland, and I probably shouldn't guess, but I'm thinking maybe that's why they said we're not going to do clear vision triangles, I had a hard time. I didn't actually, I had to pretend I lived there and had an address because you can't get a response to a question when you call Portland unless you have an address to offer. And so I offered the address of a friend of mine who lives on a corner. And so I was able to talk to somebody. But it was hard to get an answer, about their policy-making decision there, as opposed to just, what I could do on that particular corner. So it wasn't really all that helpful. So I don't know, does that help you or not?
Or now we're talking about all driveways or driveways by intersections?
When we talk about driveways, we're talking about all driveways, and we can and you can be specific if you want to about commercial driveways or alleys as opposed to residential driveways, or you can talk about all driveways. I'm asking you for direction on that, on what you think should be our policy.
I have no problems if you've got a new development coming up or something else like this with having the clear view and things like this, but with existing places in town, I don't think it's going to work.
Well, and I think that's why we have our conditions, our exceptions, I'm sorry, because we do talk about existing driveways being an exception. And we could exclude some new driveways, but not required parking. So, this is pretty flexible, and I'm looking for, what it is you'd like to do on that. But existing driveways, clearly, if people are used to parking somewhere and they're counting on that for their parking space, their required parking, at this point in time, it would be very difficult to, say that that doesn't count, or that, you have to come up with another 7.5 feet. I realize that. I think everybody realizes that that's just not going to happen. So rather than ignore it, we put it in the exceptions.
See, what I'm worried about is right now I sit on the city council, and right now you're in the planning department, things like this. What happens 4 years down the line from here when all of a sudden we've got a different council and a different planning commission, and all of a sudden, bam, well, this is what they decided back then. The same thing, the different ordinances we do, I can't totally agree with the whole ordinance. I understand your thing with the setbacks for the intersections, I understand that, but for the length of the street, I have a problem with it. With existing, where the things are existing right now, saying that, we're going to maybe have these, maybe not have these.
Well, but let's try to get some clarification on your question and concern, because there's an exception, and Deborah, jump in, but I hear an exception list, trying to take care of...
A proposed exception list, yeah.
Well, but it could be just by your motion, you could make that the exception list. So
I'll make that motion.
Well, yeah.
I don't know about the. I'm still not all sold on the one for all these. All the driveways.
Right.
And then corner lots, I've got no problem with.
Okay.
Corners, I've got no problems with. All existing lots down the street, I cannot see having that. The clear view, because you're going to run into so many problems with existing places. New developments, I have no problem with. I understand. I remember going, to the suburbs, you see all the houses, lawns, no streets, no trees, no anything. Everybody can pull out of their driveway. They got huge driveways and things like that. Got no problem with that. But,
So kind of clicking off those things,
okay.
That would be the process that we'd go through and as we listen to public testimony and our own discussion, I would think. Because what I've heard is planning has run into problems with the size of the triangle today, that it's too onerous.
At intersections.
Okay.
Yes.
At intersections.
Because that's all we have right now.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's at intersections.
Okay.
Yeah, I understand that part. That's why I say I've got no problems with that at intersections.
But clicking off, so what I hear is the recommendation is to reduce that at intersections.
Yes.
Correct?
Definitely.
And that's
Well,
that 7, is that?
Reduce it and change the shape.
Right, to that shape, that
Mhm.
long, and it's 10 by 50?
50. Mhm.
Triangle. So, and that'd be at intersections. And so from there, we then click to the next one and say, how do you feel about driveways or alleys? Or
And that one I don't buy off on.
Okay, so
That one I don't buy
I think that's what we'll get into, is so you need to keep track of, kind of your notes, rather than, so we don't get into the trap of, approving
Like the
one
intersections
big.
I've got no problems with. It's the driveways I have a problem with.
I guess I'm trying to figure out, right now, we don't have them at driveways and stuff, only at intersections.
We don't have them in residential driveways, right? And we have ineffective ones in commercial driveways.
Yeah, because of the size. Okay. So I guess why, because I either wasn't paying attention, and I apologize, but why did we move to residential driveways as incorporating into this?
Well, we got some statistics from the police department about where accidents occur, and a lot of them occur at places other than the intersection of two streets. But, we don't have enough detail that we can really say specifically that they occur at driveways. But, that's kind of probably a logical place where accidents might happen, if they're going to happen, some because you've got one person going one direction and another person crossing their path. So we talked about it at the Planning Commission, and a couple of the commissioners who move around the city a lot as part of their daily work said, I do see it as a problem. I do see that driveways, that it would be nice to have clearer vision of driveways so that when I'm driving down the street, I can see somebody who's starting to back out and vice versa. And some concern about, the same concern about sidewalks. If you are approaching a driveway, either backing out or moving forward, and you can't see your neighborhood kid on the tricycle or somebody with the dog out in front of them as they cross the driveway, then, it's a potential conflict point. So that's why it's in the ordinance. There certainly are trade-offs.
And as I recall, you did talk a little bit about actually new subdivisions or cleared-cut subdivisions. They drive faster than in less cleared, treed or fenced, or because of the visual.
Well, I think that is the tendency.
Which is a good thing, isn't it? We want them driving slower?
You want them to drive slower. You want people to drive slower if you live in the neighborhood, I think. There's less noise associated with the car and that's going slower. And it's safer if somebody does get hit. If somebody gets hit at 40 miles an hour, it's likely to be a fatal accident. If somebody gets hit by somebody going 25 or 20, it's much less likely, and I used to have the statistics on this, but much less likely that it's going to be a serious injury.
So I guess that would lead me to the obvious question is you wouldn't want clear vision in the subdivision.
Well,
I don't know where the accidents happen, but I'm wondering if they happen more in the new subdivisions where there is that.
Where people are going faster.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know, and especially because we would control the intersections in the new subdivisions, they are clear, but the driveways are not necessarily.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Well, we have a list of where the collisions occurred here. I mean, we've got 98 of them occurring at intersections of US 101 with a local street.
Mm-hmm.
We've got 12 of them occurring at intersections of local streets.
Mm-hmm.
95 of them on the highway, not at an intersection with a street, but including those at intersections with driveways or alleys.
Mm-hmm. So about the same number at on the highway, about the same number with intersections with street as with in other places. So, and then on local streets it was 12.
12.
And 9
And
95
95 and on a local street not at an intersection of two streets, but including those intersections with driveways/alleys, 40.
Right.
I don't even know what that means.
Well, so there are a lot more that are happening in places on local streets other than at intersections with other streets.
So if safety was the issue, then we would want to impose the triangle at, it seems to me, at private driveways.
I think it would benefit safety.
So it'd be, carry that, the ordinance would say at new intersections or new developments, because you've got a long line of exceptions that would not, trees and walls and fences. Would be exempt, or, would have exceptions. So it'd be something going forward, then a guide for new subdivisions, which seems kind of limiting, again, for our land, massive land that's undeveloped.
In the planning department, as I said before, where we see this come up, where we talk about the clear vision triangle is when we have a proposal for a new house, typically.
And a corner, it'd have to be a corner lot.
At a corner.
Corner lot.
At two, intersections of two streets. For enforcement purposes, if someone had a real issue in their neighborhood, or, as a couple commissioners who spend a lot of time in their cars during the workday, they said, it's really a problem for me because I can't see, and I have to slow down more than I would if I had a little bit of vision. I have to pretty much come to a stop, that kind of thing. So it's it's kind of a trade-off. But typically, what our issue has been in the planning department is when we're trying to help a person place their house and avoid the clear vision triangle.
So immediately, just reducing that would be a huge help to those.
I think it would be more effective with a longer triangle.
You're right. Chester?
Since Portland has no regulation, does that mean that this is not a state mandate? This is a local option?
It seems to be. We had quite a variety all over. Every place I looked, it was something different. So I was looking for sort of a standard, and I did not really find that.
Speaking to the issue that the mayor raised in terms of safety and not having a clear vision triangle, thereby slowing traffic down, it strikes me that we saw a similar example of that with these flashing yellow lights at the crosswalk at the U.S. Market, with a pedestrian being hit in spite of the flashing lights, and those flashing lights giving the impression to people why it's safe out here, and you don't even have to look where you're going.
Wow. Well, that's kind of a loaded comment, I guess, but I've heard a lot of positive response about the flashing lights, that people really do appreciate it because they catch their attention.
I've heard the same.
Yeah. We're going to have collisions there are going to be some collisions, sadly, and regardless of what we do, but we can, we try to do the best we can, I guess.
And I appreciate your need for trying to provide clarity to new homes going up at intersections.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Just for clarity, this ordinance would eliminate 1752-060 and 1752-070 in the code. I realize the ordinance that's proposed refers to the original zoning ordinance sections, and when we bring back an ordinance, I'll set forth that language and strike it through so you can see what it is.
Then, with no questions, why don't we take public comments, if that's all right? Now's the time for public comment and testimony. And Mr. Hoover, I'm betting.
Members of the council, Jim Hoover. I'm sure you hate hearing from me as much as I hate being here. With all due respect to our planning staff and the amount of time and effort they put into this, I think there's a few things that need to be corrected. Thank you for access to your website, but I've heard a couple times it said that they measure the clear vision from the corner of the property line, and here it says, let me get exactly here. A clear vision area shall be maintained on corners of all property adjacent to the intersection of two streets. A clear vision area shall be contain no planting, trees, or fences. Measured from the top of the curb or where no curbs exist from the established center line of the street except the trees exceeding 2.5 feet. Presently, the second thing I'd like to clarify is you've heard several times that there's a 30-foot clear view setback, and it's not a 30-foot clear view setback. In residential, it's a 16-foot clear view setback, or 15. In fact, it's 15. It says, in a residential zone, the distance determined the size of the clear view should be 30 feet, and in all other zones, it should be 15. It's not 30 everywhere. It's 15 in a commercial zone. There's a big difference when you start measuring from the edge of the street or when you start measuring from the edge of the property lines. We have a lot of streets in town that are 20 feet wide and a 40-foot right-of-way. If that street is offset entirely to one side of that right-of-way, you could have a lot of landscaping that you would normally want to have in the front yard of a house. In fact, we have landscaping ordinances that require you to have a certain number or certain amount of your front yard vegetated and require you to have a certain number of points for each tree and shrub and things like that to have in your front yard. I would expect, once again, that we would have a problem that we're trying to solve by this. And while I respect that we need to probably look at this and say, is it necessary, to on one hand say Portland doesn't have it, which is the largest metropolitan area in the state of Oregon, and we've had a 15 and a 30-foot setback, I would anticipate that Portland would have, per thousands of miles traveled or how that's measured, hundreds of times or 100% more accidents from clear vision. When you're looking at the number of accidents that happen in the middle of the street, you're presuming that all accidents happen from people backing out of their driveway, when in fact probably more than 50% of those accidents would seem more likely to be caused by people pulling into their driveway, turning across to oncoming traffic, and not being able to see, like people turning to oncoming traffic at intersections and have accidents. Deborah stated very clearly, and she and I talked about this several months ago, that people drive faster where there's larger clear view areas, and I appreciated the mayor's comment on that. So it seems by that logic that we'd be doing away with all clear view area requirements like they have in Portland, because that would discourage people from driving faster. It would actually require people to be more safe because they wouldn't be able to just assume they can see up and down the street and rip out of their driveway. It would require people to go slower around corners, and that would be all safety for reducing the accidents. I have a property in Cutler City. I did a survey of Cutler City. 70% of the properties in Cutler City are presently in violation of the clear view ordinances that we have right now. I would expect that there would be some huge amount of accidents that were related to those. There's another big issue we haven't talked about. This doesn't address intersections where there's stoplights and traffic controls. I'm thinking the intersection where you have Maxwell's on one corner, you have a donut factory on the other corner, Pumpkin Barney's on another corner. Those are all pre-existing buildings that if they sustained more than 50% damage due to a fire or an earthquake, couldn't be rebuilt in their same pattern because they would have to conform with the new ordinances while they'd be pre-existing. And while you have traffic controls and stoplights and crossing lights, it doesn't address that. It doesn't address streets that dead end with a single half a block that might not have any driveways off them. I can think of a myriad number of things that are individual cases, and once again, we're trying to hit a one-size-fits-all solution to a problem that we say hasn't worked because we have a one-size-fits-all, and we acknowledge that Portland doesn't have any size, and they don't have problems, and I ask the question again, what is the problem we're trying to solve other than we have an ordinance that isn't needed, is ineffectual, that hasn't been enforced, that instead of just saying if Portland doesn't need it, maybe we don't need it, we're trying to somehow come up with some language or some way of making it less prohibitive or less restrictive on being able to rebuild buildings. And we put in a zillion, once again, I said it earlier, if 95% of the solution retains the problem. What we've done here is we've left all the pre-existing conditions for all the 70 lots in Cutler City that potentially have damage to people backing out or pedestrians or bikes, whatever. So we're saying we're going to leave an ordinance in place, but we're going to leave all the problem in place because we can't even say that there's a problem in the first place or substantiate by statistics that the problem exists. And pardon me, but it just seems like craziness once again that we're going down this exact same road one more time. I thank you for the extra couple of minutes. One more it's really hard to make public comment on a moving target. And if this is my 3 minutes for public comment, and I don't even know what the ordinance is that's being proposed that I'm commenting on, because if you said it's 1 foot by 50, I might have a different comment than if you change it to 5 foot by 50 or 7.5 by 50, which is what the Planning Commission said. Or if you as a city council all of a sudden decide you want to make it 10 foot by 50 or 30 foot by 50, and if I come and share with you my thoughts at the start of this process, since it's this moving target that I'm aiming at, and I use up my 3 minutes to actually be able to make some public comment on what you might eventually morph to or get to, that doesn't really include me as the public. And I always thought that when it got to a public comment process, it was something a little more structured where I was actually commenting on the ordinance, not commenting on a discussion of the ordinance or something that was proposed at 7.5 feet by a planning commission that staff decided to write 10, and they're telling you, well, it could be 10 what we like, or it could be 7.5 what the planning commission likes, or you can make it 5 or 30, or include driveways, or not include driveways, or include alleyways, or have corners or not corners, have commercial. And it just seems like craziness that the process is proceeding this way when you want input from the general public, more than just Jim Hoover, but people that are potentially impacted by this, in the city of Lincoln City. And at what point do we show up and actually say, what you're proposing, I think, has problems? So thank you very much for your time once again.
Thank you.
I sincerely mean that.
Say, Mr. Mayor.
Yep.
Say, Jim, could I ask you a question before you go? I get it about, the language is got several options right now. But if you had a magic wand, and I don't mean to put you on the spot or have a long answer to this, but would there be any parts of this that you might would be a good idea to bring into play based on what we have right now? Because right now, and I'll tell you what happened to me not 2 years ago. I built a house and I had to comply with the 30-foot triangle. The purpose of that for it just basically doesn't exist. It's on a street that doesn't go anywhere and never will. Would it be a good idea to tighten up?
I greatly respect that we are taking a look at an existing ordinance and trying to determine whether or not it's serving a purpose or serving the purpose it was intended to serve. And to that end, I believe the question's right. Should the clear view in residential be 30 feet? Should the clear view in commercial be 15 feet? Should be measured from the edge of the property or from the edge of the street. And while the planning staff will tell you that they've always interpreted that to be from the edge of the street, or from the edge of the property line, it doesn't say that in the municipal code, which points out a huge problem that we have when our municipal code says it's a clear vision corner from the top edge of the street or from edge of pavement, and our planning staff determines that that's not what it's meant. It's actually meant from the edge of the property line or from the property line. So I think that the process of reviewing these and saying what is needed, how does that mesh with the other things we're trying to accomplish with regards to vegetation or beautification of the front lawns, asking has it served a purpose to be at 30 feet and 15 feet? Does Portland experience these huge high rates of pedestrian accidents because they have zero? I think those are all really important questions. I'm just not comfortable with any of the answers that I've heard to that question being, I can't find, I'm paraphrasing, but what I've heard is I can't find any real consistency for this. I can't find any real reason why people are doing this. Some people think one way, some people think the other. And so we're going to change ours to something else. without there being a basis for it. So I'm all for asking the question. I'm all for saying, does it make sense? And if it makes sense, if there's some practical reason or safety reason to leave it where it is or to change it to something else, I'm all for that. But once again, I can't find the statistical or the relational or 99% of the cities and towns are doing it this way and we're the only one that's not doing it this way, that gives me comfort with how we've come up with 10 by 50 or 15 by 15 from the edge of the street or 15 by 15 from the property line or any of the things that I would expect as a property owner or as a builder or as a person who travels around Lincoln City and has grandchildren, that would be what this was being based on, other than we're changing it, but we really don't know why we're changing it or what we're changing it to or why we're changing it to what we're changing it to. And I'm not trying to, whenever you give public testimony, you run the risk of irritating another percentage of the planning department or the city, and that's not my purpose. I'm just hoping that I ask a question or two or three or four or 10 or 100 that actually have some validity that says, if we're going to do this, let's do it right. Let's do it with a reason. Let's not do it just we're changing it because what we have is wrong, but we can't really figure out why we're changing it or what we're changing it. And I'm not sure we have any of that information yet. Once again, if you're looking at it based on Portland, and maybe there's other big metropolitan areas that have the same way, maybe the thing is say 0, and we're going to make people safer because people are going to drive slower. That seems like it has as much sense and common sense or basis for it as anything else. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Not the two in the back, I guess. So, now's the time for check to see if there's any representatives from the public agencies. Hearing, seeing none. Is there any further comments or motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Is there a second? We have a motion to close with a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed with a nay? Hearing none. What is the pleasure of the council?
Are you going to close the record as well?
Oh, good point.
If you close the record now, then you can just continue, you can have deliberations now, or you can continue deliberations to the next meeting.
Yeah. I'd say we close the public record as well, unless the council is thinking, this would be a way for more input before I discuss it at next council meeting.
Yeah, I think that would be a good idea, Mr. Mayor.
What?
Having more input.
So keep the record open?
I'd like to keep the record open.
Okay. Anyone else be open?
By keeping the record open, now that we've closed the public hearing, that would be written.
Yes.
Correct.
And to be consistent with the last one, if you want to do that, that would be May 5th at noon, I believe.
Right.
March 5th.
March 5th. Yeah, March 5th at noon. Okay. All right. Is that fine with council?
Yeah.
Could I entertain a motion from Gary with that?
I would like to make that motion.
I'll second it.
We have a second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Great.
Continuing deliberations.
And then we'll continue this deliberation on March 10th at this place, this location, at 6 p.m. Okay? Thank you, Deborah. All right. I'm ready to suggest that we continue the next two public hearings to March 10th. Move those two on.
Could we, just a suggestion, Mayor, could we ask if there's anyone present who wishes to testify on those? Because if there isn't, I'm wondering if that changes things.
I think we'd still have to open the
Okay.
hearing.
Yeah.
Our notification.
Yeah.
If you're doing this as me, I'm fine.
No, I'm doing you this because it's 9:15 and
Okay.
3+ hours.
Go
Yeah.
longer.
And I know there was comments at the Planning Commission on at least one of these ordinances, so it may be that they didn't want to come tonight with a crowd, and maybe they'll come to it.
I see. Well, let me check. Is there anybody in the audience that wishes to make comments on one of the other two, which is accessory dwellings and cottage houses, that's not able to come March 10th? Okay. So,
We need to open them and then,
or can we just,
I think as long as you continue them and then read the script next time, and nobody's here to talk about it. If you were going to take comment now, I would say
we'd have to open it.
Do the script, open it.
Right.
But if you just continue it, I think you're okay.
So if someone make motion to continue public hearing on accessory dwelling units till March 10th?
so moved.
Seconded.
At this location, 6 p.m. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed with a nay? Hearing none. As well as public hearing on cottage housing developments till March 10th, 6 p.m., this location.
So moved.
Seconded.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed with a nay? Hearing none. Thank you. We have, and we need to do the same thing now. I only had made the announcement that we were going to continue the council deliberation on the yes-no zones till March 10th, this location, 6 p.m.
So moved.
Seconded.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed with a no? Hearing none. Thank you. Then we'll move to ordinances, and we have an ordinance number 2014-02. This is the second reading.
Actually, this is not the second reading.
Oh.
We did not have the first reading at the last meeting. In fact, I specifically apologize that it says that. But this would be the first reading of an ordinance amending the Lincoln City Municipal Code, Title V, Business Taxes, Licenses, and Regulations, Chapter 5.16, Special Events, adding exemptions to narrow and clarify application of the ordinance. What this is you had it before you at the last meeting, and what I need to do is write amendments to the parks regulations and catch them up to this. So I'm asking that you do the first reading tonight, but then not have the second reading until the 28th of March. So that would give me time to come in on the 10th with the parks regulations that match and catch up to this. And again, this was an effort to attempt to streamline what the VCB director is asked to consider, when certainly some of the things that are going could just go to the community center for standard documents and wouldn't have to go through the VCB process. It's also a clarification of the fact that this permit does not supplant or replace your zoning district. You have to comply with what your zoning district says. If you're allowed to do certain events in your zoning district, then you're allowed to do them in accordance with those regulations. And if you have a zoning district that doesn't allow it, you can't come and get one of these permits and somehow do something that's not permitted in the zone. So I need a little more time to catch up the other amendments, but I wanted to move this forward, so that's why it's here.
So did you want to read the professional description for the first reading, or was that?
I'm sorry, it is late. I'm not sure what you're asking me.
Usually, and you may have just done it with the explanation, but typically,
I usually give you a proposed motion, which I think is, I did the reading, so.
But an ordinance amending the Lincoln City Municipal Code, Title V.
Yes, I thought I read it, but I can read it again. This is a first reading of an ordinance amending the Lincoln City Municipal Code, Title V, Business Taxes, Licenses, and Regulations, Chapter 5.16, Special Events, adding exemptions to narrow and clarify application of the ordinance. The recommendation is that you approve the first reading and set second reading for March 24th and authorize, I'm sorry, is that the right date? March 24th and authorize receipt of written comments in the record until noon on March 19th. 24th is our meeting.
Thank you. Is there questions from council? Mr. Upchell, I assume you'd be the one we could ask questions?
Yeah, I don't think Sandy's here, so.
Okay. So I had a couple just in going through. It starts off with the definitions, and second page where it talks about is not special events, and these are above the line is you do need the permit. Down below, not a special event, and those don't need an event permit. That first paragraph in the description on page 3. It's an event which requires the closing of a street, an event that involves the authorized sale, and it has those. Then right in the middle is not a special event under this ordinance. So I was trying to get from that definition which ones needed the permit and which ones didn't.
I'm not sure where that language is occurring.
Line 6 of...
Are you
on page 3?
On page 3.
An event, regardless of the location, conducted by the City of Lincoln City, its authorized employees or contractors, is not a special event under this ordinance. So that states an exemption from the inclusion above, which is the event requires the closing of a street, the event is on city property, involves the consumption of alcohol, or it's sound amplification on public or private property.
Does require a permit or does not?
Yes, if you look above, I'm sorry, this...
No.
Didn't think it was confusing. Yeah, special event means any non-exempt event or activity, whether conducted on public or private property, which places an additional demand on city resources or emergency services, including public health or safety. So that's the broad definition. You're basically using city resources or emergency services. That's kind of a large, net, captures a lot of things, but it says unless exempted, the following types of activities or events require the permit. Something that requires a closed street, like a marathon or something like that, or other traffic control, an event which involves the authorized sale or consumption of alcohol on city property, an event which includes sound amplification. So those things are examples of things that typically would require special events. You're going to use our park, you're going to use our street, and you're going to place an additional impact on city services. Then it says, however, if it's a city-conducted event, we don't need a special event. So this is the VCB telling me we don't want to issue permits to ourselves and go through that process because it's us and we know how to provide for ourselves to address all the impacts.
Well, there's why I'm hoping there's somewhere in here, or we know that if it's ourselves, we're talking to ourselves, i.e. somehow the police department gets notified, or other services. So that sometimes is the rub. It has the appearances that the city doesn't have to jump the same hoops, and yet we're impacting the same services.
Yes, I understand. Again, this was because the VCB is basically trying not to have to issue permits to themselves for that thing. They may have to, they want to put on an event at the community center, they might have to go through just what part of the stuff I wanted to bring forward was making sure that there's things in place there to make sure. But if it's an event somewhere, that the city's putting on, I agree that we should have some catch on ourselves, checks and balances on our department activities.
And that's all, as I was reading through the things that jumped up. Jumping over to page 5, see, we talk about fewer than 75 participants, but I can envision a afternoon function outdoors where, are we talking about 75 at any one time or cumulative?
You know, this was actually it was your recommendation. Remember, I just kind of put these things in ordinance form. I'm trying to assist staff in coming forward, and 75 was the number that they
I think
gave.
that's at one time, because the impact, if it's spread out over a lengthy period of time, you know.
But could we say that? Because I'm thinking of a lot of events that trickle in over time. But
yeah,
I can specify that.
Then, staying on that, page 5, down near the permit application dates and timeframes, I found it interesting that we can do something in 10 days, but we'd like to have 90 to 60.
Well, again, that was like
I know.
the emergency kind of thing, and unfortunately, when you write something like that in the ordinance, you get exactly the comment you made. Well, why do you need 60 days if you said here you can do it in 10 business days? And that's just to try to look ahead to the unforeseen circumstance. I could put in some criteria that say other than extraordinary circumstances, but most people will delay doing something, especially if it involves paying money or doing work like this until the last minute. And if they think they can wait till the 11th day, then they might do it. I have great hesitation about adding that in there because it looks like we've got all this out.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Then over on 6, where we brought in the ADA kind of stuff. So the question I have is more as the attorney. We're having the organizers certify that they're following everything. And I'm willing to bet they don't know what they're signing. So how do we, one, make sure they know what they're signing, i.e. what the requirements of ADA are?
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't want to become I'm not their attorney.
I know.
And I don't want to give them legal advice about it, but I do want them to know that we're taking it seriously and go seek their own legal advice about their plans. Now, it's quite possible that people will come in 11 days before their event, and they'll have no idea what's required under the ADA, and they'll stand at the counter and say, can you tell me what's required? And staff, being customer service oriented, is always trying to help, but the fact is we're putting it on them to ascertain what is required.
So let's hypothetically, if they don't know and they don't do it and something happens, are we liable? At what point we, the city, with the deeper pockets?
Again, that's why we require insurance and why we recommend we never waive insurance. But again, you shouldn't have the duty, responsibility, or liability associated with their compliance with the conditions, which is why you're telling them here that under penalty of perjury, they're responsible. They need to make sure that they're not only they comply on paper, but they make sure that they implement it when they have the event, because some of these things are active and require, actually doing things, not just having a plan.
Okay. I apologize, but reading this, over on 8.
Very clarifying, Mr. Mayor.
We inserted, which I think I like, is the council has the ability by resolution to make some exceptions, is how I read the insert on page 8. Council may by resolution reduce, waive, or pay. Is that? I mean, that's
Yeah,
the intent?
I mean, I think there was, the initial proposal from the VCB director was to say, here's a chart, and these will be waived, and these will not, and I didn't want to put that in the ordinance, because I think it deserves discussion by the council, and it may change over time.
Right.
You may say, you know, we're feeling flush right now, let's go ahead and pay the insurance cost for this kind of event. And there's programs where you can go to CCIS and say they have a tenant liability user policy, it's called TULIP program or something, and so they can make available to groups insurance at a lower rate so we can require it, and if you wanted to, for certain groups or certain classes of groups, 501c3, you wanted to pay the insurance cost or provide funds for payment of the insurance cost, we can make sure there's insurance, because we don't want to be waiving it, and that makes CCIS happy. But you may not have money every year to do that. So just like other funding decisions, it would be year by year.
And then on page 9, you inserted and I'm assuming this was the piece from the older one that we wanted to check with CIS whether waive insurance or require more insurance depending on their activity. But yet, I didn't see the insert of checking with. It's consultation with city manager, and I respect Mr. Hawker's ability to evaluate high risk, but wouldn't we want to still consult our insurance agents?
Yeah, but I don't know they need to write it into the code. I just wanted someone above the director to review it.
To bump it up.
Review the decision. I mean, we could free to contact them. I think mostly what I was concerned about is reducing, and what CCIS, when we did meet with them, their main concern was that we not reduce or waive, except, and in some very small. Actually, they talked to us about some other kinds of insurance that we may not be making sure people have. But the number of instances where insurance wouldn't be permitted is going to be very small, and may be associated with some of those things that aren't really VCB director decisions, but rather, community center or library.
Then down number 8 in that page 9, talk about financial security and talks about a standard. And yet I couldn't find what the standard application that granted permit. There's waive the financial security requirement. No, I don't see it standard.
This is kind of like the mushball kind of issue. When there's been a documented noncompliance with code, we may be asking for financial security as part of the permit conditions to guarantee that if officers have to be on overtime, that there's money there for that. So we don't send people a bill and they don't pay it, and then we're in a position the following year of saying sorry, and maybe that organizer is gone, and we don't want to say no to somebody that wasn't associated with the prior failure. So this would secure those kind of conditions. But it could be, and that's why I threw in the waiver.
Yeah.
If they've straightened it out and not had a problem, we can waive it.
We can waive it. Okay. That's all thank you. That helped. Any questions from any other counselors?
Yeah, I thought I understood this, Mr. Mayor, when I read over it, but now I have a question concerning, if you go back to page 5, and you don't need to, but of going from the 45 to 60 days, and then later on, page 10 or 11, wherever it was, if, let me see, the director accept a late application. Where am I missing how long the director has in order to accept or reject the application? Because if the application is rejected, the applicant has the right to go to the city manager, and that says 7 days. I'm trying to get the numbers down up.
As an appeal?
Yeah, for an appeal. So if the director did not accept or reject the application for sufficient time for an appeal, and I would say that it would have to be at least a week.
The 7 days is for action on a denial.
I realize that, but what happens if, I mean, how long does the director have to get the application back to the applicant?
To issue the permit? That's.
Where is that?
I don't know that there's a time frame.
Well, what happens if the director gets the, refuses the permit, 6 days? Yeah, with 6 days to go, when David would have 7 days to, I mean, we've got to, you know, I mean, if we extend it from 45 to 60 days, it seems to me we'd have sufficient time to say the director would have 20 days to give back to the applicant, or 25 days or something.
Well, it's not just the director. Remember, the VCB director sends the application to other city departments that may be affected, and they review it and provide comments.
Okay, but how long then? 30 days?
I don't see a time frame for that process.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
But I think that's what the councilor is suggesting is.
30 days is fine.
Yeah, 30 days. And that would give somebody a fair shot that they could come back and throw it in David's lap and give him enough time to be able to either do something or not.
I'll take a look at adding some suggested language to put some time frames on the review by the departments and the decision by the VCB director, so it falls within the 60 days, and we have time to, you know, get an appeal. Now, remember, the 7 days isn't for the appeal to be heard, it's to set the appeal.
Right.
So it may be, you know, days after that, so.
And that's why if you add that all up, then you can come up with an amount of time that the director could accept or reject.
But it just would have to be from the receipt of a complete application, because, you know, sometimes what the problem is the application isn't complete, and things kind of trickle in, and, you know, it may have been there a long time, but it's not complete until it's complete, and then that's when the time frame starts.
I just want to see something, and I know we all do, inviting, so that people will want to have special events. Try to help them do that.
Some suggestions for you?
It's up to you if you want to approve first reading and edit for.
And then we'd be able to see any changes, because you would have coordinated then with Parks and.
Yes.
Entertain a motion to approve the first reading.
I move that we approve first reading ordinance 2014-02 and set second reading for March 24, 2014. Authorize receipt of written comments into the record until noon, March 19, 2014.
Seconded.
All those in favor? Roll call.
Quant?
Yes.
Anderson?
Yes.
Ryan? Ellingson?
Yes.
Norikis?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
This is ordinance 2014-03, an ordinance amending the Lincoln City Municipal Code, Title IX, Public Peace, Morals, and Welfare, Chapter 9.04, Crimes and Violations, Section 9.04010, Adoption of State Criminal Laws and Procedures, adding ORS 133 to Sections 2 and 3. I missed ORS 133 in the ordinance that we adopted back in January. And so this is simply to correct that omission. 133 contains the provision for failure to appear on a criminal citation. So if we want to take that and then reduce it to a violation and I can then charge people with a non-criminal offense when they fail to show up in court. It's not required that they do that. It's simply an option. And again, this was to address what the Supreme Court did in the Benoit and Fuller cases.
Any discussion?
I would move that first reading.
Second.
All right. We have a motion to approve first reading of ordinance 2014-03.
Norikis?
Yes.
Quant?
Yes.
Anderson?
Yes.
Ryan? Yes. And Ellingson?
Yes.
Motion carries.
If you would indulge me, I'll do the second reading.
Please.
This is the second reading of ordinance number 2014-03, an ordinance amending the Lincoln City Municipal Code, Title IX, Public Peace, Morals, and Welfare, Chapter 9.04, Crimes and Violations, Section 9.04010, Adoption of State Criminal Laws and Procedures, adding ORS 133 to Sections 2 and 3. I'd ask for approval of the second reading and adoption of the ordinance.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion to approve and adopt ordinance number 2014-03.
Quant?
Yes.
Anderson?
Yes.
Ryan? Ellingson?
Yes.
And Norikis?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Great. Thank you, gentlemen. This will be the time now for any additional comments from the public. Please. Yes, because we can't get it on recording.
Hi, I'm Kip Ward, Lincoln City, Oregon. And I'm sorry, I wasn't planning to come up here, but I just couldn't resist. The ordinance that we were talking about shortly ago regarding special events, would that include the eventuary, for example, if it was having a wedding or a beach bite, that type of thing?
I don't think so.
Just a quick question.
That's one of the issues, and the eventuary keeps coming up. And as an example, I believe because we are regulating public and private property with that ordinance, the eventuary, if it needed facilities that were public facilities, like a public parking lot, in order to hold an event, then that might create an additional demand. It might be required to obtain a special event permit. Now, again, as I mentioned, one of the issues that we've been discussing is that the special event permit does not amend your zoning. So I would refer you to the zoning, or the planning director in this case, to look at the permissible uses of the property to see if, in fact, special events are permitted on your property. If those special events have an impact on public facilities, you may require a special event permit. I did, in trying to address this, because it kept coming up as an example, I put in, despite the fact that, I put in an exemption that said, hey, if you're in compliance with your zoning and you can handle all your parking on site, you're exempt.
Or on private property.
Yes.
This would just be for spillover into public.
What the ordinance addresses is impacts on public facilities and services. And if you're going to impact public facilities and services, then you need a special event permit. But it also isn't intended to replace the zoning code. So if your zoning for your property contemplates those events and you have adequate facilities to handle those events on site, I put in an exemption in the ordinance. One of the exemptions was written to address this kind of an issue. You have property, it's properly zoned, you can handle the overflow, or for a special event you have adequate parking. There's really no need to go through some special process. Again, we don't want to require a permit where we have areas that frankly encourage these kind of special events. Now, the requirement was, well, you have to have your parking on site. Well, I don't think the eventuary has adequate parking on site, so I wrote in something specifically to address that if there was a shared parking agreement off-site, that might address, notwithstanding the requirement to have your parking on site, a shared parking agreement for off-site parking, like an empty bank parking lot, would be sufficient to satisfy the requirement. So you wouldn't say you need a public facility, you wouldn't have impacts on public facility because you've handled it. And so I realize this is, I haven't had a chance to sit down with Sandy and the planning director and talk about how that works, but I think we're trying to address the eventuary type issue when we came up with that language.
Well, I didn't understand a lot of that. Not that you weren't coherent, I didn't understand the process. It seems to me that there's any number of reasons that a permit for us could be denied, and certainly we don't plan that far in advance. We're a business and we're open every day, and it's like anyone else of you having to get a business permit to open your doors. To this point, you have to decide whether or not what type of businesses that you want in Lincoln City.
Well, we wrote an exemption from this special event permit for things that are being conducted consistent with your zoning, provided you're not putting those additional impacts on public property. So if you want to come in and talk to me, I'd be happy to talk about what our plan was.
I don't mean to take up your time tonight.
No, we were trying to not require permits for things that were contemplated by the zoning of the property.
Okay.
Yeah, but Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
I'm getting this. Is how I had interpreted that is, generally speaking, and under most circumstances, you would not need to get a permit.
Yeah, I should.
I mean, it's an outright use. It's your business.
That's correct.
And
now I'm hearing otherwise.
Well, no,
no, I'm not.
If something were to, if a requisite for one of your events was that, where's the public area near the eventuary?
Sure.
I mean, I think if you had an event and had to, in order to have that event, had to super incorporate public property into it, then you might have to look at that and say you
close off the street, for example.
Yeah, if you wanted to close the street off, or that's a good example. I'll try to think of some other things, but
we definitely have people that park in public parking. I mean, it's
yeah, but
public
that's on street park. I mean, that's
okay.
But the problem was not. I don't know that it's a problem to park in public parking lots that are available for public use. It's that when we have illegal parking occurring that creates the issue. That's when we get the phone calls and stuff, and that's why I had written in shared parking agreements as providing more flexibility. Please come in and sit down and talk to me about it.
I mean, I guess I'm not concerned with public parking lots that are for general use. I am concerned about, in this particular case, and I don't know that there's been any problem in the past, but I am concerned about the Price and Pride parking and the library parking and the City Hall parking. So, yeah, those are, we just barely meet our parking requirement here for this use, and we can't accommodate, in many cases, depending on when, additional parking for other businesses. We have just the amount of parking that we're required to have, and we use. And so I'm particularly concerned about the downstairs parking because of the impact on Price and Pride in the library. I don't know if that's been a problem. I haven't heard that it is. But if it becomes a problem, then we should have the means to deal with it.
Well, could we maybe, I think Mr. Ward ought to come in and with staff and kind of work through, because you're obviously hearing something that you need to get further clarity on. And so I'd rather do that at the counter, if you don't mind.
No problem.
So I can close out.
At the desk. That's what I was going to.
Yeah.
So just so that you're comfortable.
Sure.
Take a look at it. No one's trying to do anything tricky.
You look kind of tricky to me. Thank you.
But
thank you.
That's why it's important to look at it.
Thanks.
Any other comments from the public? How about city councilors? Wes, you all right? Gary?
Let me see. Am I okay? For tonight, I am. Yes. It is, and I've been doing this for a long time, and it is so awkward sometimes when you keep, well, most recently it's been unusual relative to the length of time. The one example that I'm thinking of keeps coming up meeting after meeting where allegations are made and statistics are thrown around and a sense of misinformation is given. I don't know how to respond to it. I'm told on one hand that it's better to err and not say anything, kind of be the professional, so to speak, concerning the matter. On the other hand, I don't want people to think that I'm disinterested and don't have an answer for some of the things that are brought up. And I'm not thinking at all about the VRD hearing. I want to make that perfectly clear. But I wish there was a way to be more responsive at the time in the same form and fashion when the matters are brought up. It really puts us at a disadvantage. I'd like to also say to people, it's the easiest thing in the world to tear something down. I used to build things. Occasionally I'd have to knock something down in order to build it. Taking stuff down is a piece of cake. And you need to be careful with some of the things that you're doing, because that's what you're doing is you're stripping things away one item at a time. And I'll continue thinking about it. But at some future point, I may want to make a statement regarding what I'm thinking. And just some of the things is this city, when you compare this city to a city of like size, this city has more than twice as many people that we're responsible for, sometimes 3 times as many, or maybe even more than that, than what our general population is. We also have responsibilities outside of our city boundaries that are in our growth areas. And it would require a whole meeting for me to try to explain the intricacies of how certain of our things operate. For instance, we have more sewage treatment plants, we have more sewage pumps to get to our sewage treatment plant in the city of Salem. So if people want to start throwing some numbers around, just line the numbers up with what the facts are rather than making up the facts and putting numbers out.
Gary, if that's all right, this might be a good time to remind the public that what we've attempted to do on some things is place response letters on the city website. So if the consumer will look...
I'm aware of that, and I've tried to get to it at that level. It's one thing when you make a comment here, and quite frankly, I've come to the conclusion that some people like the FaceTime here of being on television, and by your own statistical analysis, this meeting could be going out to 1,000 people in some various form or fashion. And our response needs to be that obvious, I think, because when I signed up for this job, I wanted to do it to the best of my ability and bring everything into play, but I didn't sign up to be a punching bag, sitting up here, behind the desk. And thank you, Mr. Mayor. You've been very generous with your time.
All right.
Thank you
very much. Chester, you all right? Henry, all right? And I'm all right as well. Call it an evening.
Good night.